Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. This is the Wednesday, October 16th, 2019 morning session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Carla. Please call the roll.
Good morning. Udaly?
Here.
Fritz?
Here.
Fish?
Here.
Hardesty?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. Now we'll hear from legal counsel on the council rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you're in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless exiting or entering. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good, colleagues. And before we get to communications today, I'd like to make a motion to hold an evening city council session on Thursday, November 7th, 2019 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Portland Community College Southeast Campus for the remaining Portland Clean Energy Fund appointees, accepting a grant for the Bloomberg Climate Challenge, and to hear a report from PBOT on the Rose Lanes Initiative.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second from Commissioner Fritz. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
All right, thank you, colleagues. The motion passes. Communications is first up. Carla.
Item 953, a request of Stan Herman to address council regarding your constituent's question.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I want to start with, I'm not trying to pick a fight with you guys, but I'm not going away. Next month will be 3 years trying to get an answer from this Portland City Council. You probably asked me, why am I coming down here? The basic reason is I can't get any answers from anybody in any of the bureaus. They just kick the can down the road. Mr. Mayor, we didn't meet, as you said in the past. Your assistant, Michelle, was ordered to help me, but that went nowhere. Robert King met with me almost 3 months ago. I emailed him back on some questions, and I confirmed that he received the email, and I got no answer as of today. Last month when I was speaking, I believe, Amanda, you tried to respond to me, but I didn't hear you. And, Mr. Mayor, I think you leaned over and told her it fell on deaf ears, and you're probably right for that insult. I am wearing hearing aids, and the battery was dead. Amanda, thank you for your response, but your response was you didn't know the facts about a case or the applicable law. Just answer the question as it is. It's not nothing to do with any case. It's not asking for any legal opinion. Udaly, you stated to me probably a year ago that you couldn't help me with my problem. And I said, I don't have any problems. I just need you to answer your constituents' questions. Hardesty, you're new at this. You don't know how long I've been there, but I emailed you the question on your response to the email last week. Fish, I liked you on TV. You looked good on your vote. And, but again, I don't get much response on my question from you. All I want to know now, I think I will email you all requesting a meeting personally. And I'd like to know a show of hands if you will respond and have a meeting with me. Anybody? Thank you.
Seems like I'm the only person who
I
hasn't
meet
yet.
with anybody and anybody who contacts my office and asks for a meeting. So
Thank
you're
you.
not unique. If you call and ask for a meeting, you'll get one.
I noticed that
And Mr.
response
Herman,
from you.
I've already met with you, as have members of my staff, and we've communicated with you
As of
I'm
the
sorry, I
staff.
didn't hear you.
repeatedly.
You will or will not meet with me?
I've already met with you, sir.
I'm asking again, will you meet with me again?
If there's something new that you have to contribute to the conversation, I would entertain an email first, so let's start there.
I just need a yes or no, sir.
No.
Okay. You Daly?
Nope.
Fish?
No, and Mr. Herman, let me just say, you've been before us now
3 years.
dozens of times, and there are other issues here than simply this question that you're posing. This is not the appropriate place to hash these out. I wish you well, sir, in your life. I wish you well in whatever is going on in your life. You've exhausted this process. You're not going to get any relief here. You've been told that repeatedly by people. I have a sweet spot for you because of your persistence in coming, but this has now gone beyond a constituent request. There are other issues here. We wish we could be helpful. We can't. And I just think, sir, you're taking up the time of some other person that could come before us and raise a concern, and you have been told repeatedly, you have been given answers that you don't accept, and that's fine. But there's nothing we can do for you. There's no further relief we can give you, and this doesn't serve any useful purpose with you coming here. If there's other issues you'd like us to address in your life, I think we would be happy to do that, but this doesn't serve any purpose.
Well, it does, and yes, there is more to it. One of them is to provide a city park for the Portland area for canoes and kayaks for kids, and the other is a piece of property I have that I've been holding back to provide for low-income housing for about 120 units. I'm not going to step in those boundaries until we can get some communication going, but I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, Carla, I can't tell if the next individuals want to come up together or separately.
They do want to come up together.
Very good.
Okay.
Go ahead and call them up.
Sure. Item 954, request of Amy Wilson to address council regarding 3.96 code change. 955, request of John Tepley to address council regarding neighborhood associations. And 956, request of Avery Picard to address council regarding 3.96 code change. And 957, request of Claire Coleman Evans to address council regarding the proposed changes to 3.96.
Good morning. Welcome.
The fourth person.
Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Very good. Thank you.
My name is John Tepley, and I'm with the Elizabeth Jones Arts Center. I wish to thank Commissioner Hugh Daly for coming to the Elizabeth Jones Arts Center during the Neighborhood Association's Rock exhibit and meeting with us. I will admit that I was totally charmed, and when we talked, and anytime you would like to come back to the Arts Center, it would be my pleasure to give you a personal tour. And I wish to thank Mayor Wheeler, who also came to the Arts Center with his wife and family. And thank you for the encouragement about putting up the 2-foot by 1 mile mural project. We finally found a city site to exhibit, and we put up 5 city blocks of the project, and it was amazing. Thank you. A few years back, I had the privilege to give testimony to the city council. This was for the vacation of a traffic island in St. John's called Ivy Island. I was against a vacation, and the then neighborhood association was for it. Through the process, I submitted a petition with 1,700 signatures, and we had a postcard campaign about the subject. It was a most pleasurable sight to walk into Amanda Fritz's office and see piles of postcards on her desk concerning Ivy Island. And yes, I also started the postcard campaign about the code change, kind of my MO. And I would like to thank Commissioner Fish for actually seeing our group and listening to an Ivy Island presentation. This was the most amazing experience for me. I was just this guy in the neighborhood who had an objection to an official neighborhood association position. And here I was meeting with city commissioners and their staff were returning my phone calls. Though I wasn't part of the official neighborhood association, my stature and my voice was elevated because of the neighborhood association. I lost that fight for Ivy Island. What is important is that even though I was outside the neighborhood association, we were playing by the same rules. These rules were published, and you could go to them, go to what was then ONI, read the rules, and find the staff to help you understand them. There was a thick booklet that contained the official guidelines that was public and that everyone had access to. It created a safe and transparent place with structure that allowed any person the opportunity to engage in local issues through the neighborhood association. Much of this was troublesome and hard to do, but it was all above board and amazing to see in motion. It kept everybody honest, democracy in its purest form, a safe place for civic engagement for everyone. Strong support of coalitions is a belief in democracy is the best system and that every voice in our community should be valued and respected. And that's what I would like to see is strong support of our coalitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners and Mayor. My name is Claire Coleman Evans. A major concern of neighborhood associations and residents of Portland is feeling like they have not been properly informed about this code change process in a timely manner. Going forward, I would hope that everyone is willing to work together and be well informed far in advance of the process of a realistic schedule to be set for everyone. Along those lines, there is still much confusion as to what the immediate and long-term and processes will be in the future. All of this uncertainty and divisiveness is challenge at best for coalitions and neighborhood associations, which have been a model of strength nationally recognized for providing communication and transparency between the city and the people of Portland. Rather than destroy the current neighborhood association, we should work together to strengthen and make sure it continues to work for all of Portlanders while also being open to other models of engaging residents. What would really help ease the tensions and adversarial process that has occurred is to renew the coalition's contract for another 5 years. I would also like to know, what will the November 14th council session be about? Will this be a first reading? Will this be a vote requested? In an email to the disbanded code committee on November 7th, but was not shared with the public, indicated that an ordinance, an administrative rule, and a resolution would be presented to council. A resolution to convey a multi-bureau work group to review cross-sectional functions in the city code and work a diverse range of stakeholders to make recommendations to council for modernizing practices to equally provide services to more Portland. But I noticed on Commissioner Udaley's Facebook post and the city website a few weeks ago that she said she wanted to slow the process down, listen to other voices, and maybe revise the code proposed language. Her October 7th email, however, does not seem to reflect slowing things down. NEs do want to slow the process down so they can give input on how 3.69 code should be revised and not just have Civic Life try to sell us something that we did not have a chance involved in drafting. NEs think that they should be consulted and the commissioner should be revise a proposal based on their input as well. Convene focus groups with neighborhood associations, listen to how they think the code should be updated, and the standards should be revised and not just eliminated. Will there be a new process to take the input from stakeholders groups such as neighborhood associations and coalitions? Will there be a public involvement plan and project management plan put together that stakeholders can comment on before the process starts? And what will all this timeline look like? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Morning.
Amy Wilson. Thank you. So as Claire mentioned, our district coalitions are in a state of chaos right now due to the funding. 40-plus years ago, the city worked hard to set up an engagement system for the citizens. As Gretchen Kafori was known to say, the city funded NAs to argue with them, which is great. Like anything important, ongoing dedicated funding was established to support it, and a bureau was put in charge of ensuring its success. Coalitions were the intermediary layer that then hired staff committed to leasing building space and managed other costs to provide the on-the-ground support. And because of these committed expenses, coalitions have to rely on reasonably predictable funding. However, OCCL has upended this model in favor of a competitive bidding process, where instead of being seen as partners and collaborators, coalitions are now applicants being pitted against each other, as well as community groups. In the past, as Claire mentioned, 5-year contracts were the norm. Now coalitions are being told they will only be offered 12-month contracts with no dollar figure attached. How can you plan? At its root, the neighborhood association system functions as a citizen's check on government to address the mistakes caused by top-down policies that ignore citizen input. But instead of empowering grassroots citizens to fearlessly engage in important decision-making, groups of politically unpopular ideas could now surely be rejected. An irritating coalition could just be starved into folding. It reminds me of the Reagan administration, when they wanted to get the government size down so small you could drown it in a bathtub. We should not be upending our funding model until a code revision is adopted. This competitive bidding model is in direct contradiction to current code, which clearly requires OCCL to support coalitions. But support staff have been fired, and the funding process is in chaos right now. There is a real possibility that if this incredibly divisive process continues, it could cause great harm to our community's ability to come together to work on solving problems in the future. This process already is ripping at the social fabric of our community. There's already a growing resentful division happening between civic volunteers who used to be natural allies. Mistrust and disparagement are beginning to take root, and that is really frightening to those of us that are in the trenches right now. My 2 requests from you would be, restore the 5-year contracts with the coalitions so that they can stabilize, we can reduce the tensions, and hopefully all move forward together to make improvements in the system. The other is, we really need to engage in independent public involvement and citizen engagement professional or professionals to be a neutral party to help guide us and move us forward beyond the growing mistrust and bring us back together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank each of you for coming and say I think I can speak for my colleagues to say all of us have spent a lot of time with neighborhood associations over the last few months. Let me say that I think there's a reawakening an acknowledgement that neighborhood associations are not all created equally. They have not, as traditionally, represented all the voices in communities, so there will be changes coming. I hope you've heard that it has been slowed down, so nothing will be voted on before another process has been created to supplement the work that's already been done. I think the very good news is that every neighborhood association, all 91 of them, are awake and aware that they need to look around the community and figure out who's not at the table and get them to the table. And so I look forward to working with my colleagues and all the neighborhood associations to make sure that we live our values, which is we represent everyone, not a specific demographic group, but everyone. And I would love to hear neighborhood associations come here and tell us how they're going to achieve that goal, right? That's the question. The question is, if you will exist for another 45 years, how do you represent the community that you represent? So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being willing to be part of the solution, right? But I got to tell you, if I never have another meeting with another neighborhood association, at least in the next 6 months, right? Because I've talked to a lot of people, and everybody has the same message, right? Yes, we're not working the way we're supposed to. Yes, we're not totally representative of our community. Yes, we know we need to change, right? So let's just do the work and make it so.
I would love to invite you to a King Neighborhood Association meeting, and
I
you
come
can.
to all of them. I'd be happy. You just contact
Please
my
do.
office.
No,
I
we would
come.
love it.
I'm at meetings every night, so
Yay!
just invite me.
We appreciate your
Thank you.
willingness.
Appreciate
Yes.
you coming.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Isn't there
Udaly.
one more person?
Carla, is there one more person signed up?
It was Avery Picard. He may not be here.
Is Avery Picard here? Commissioner Udaly?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I want to thank you all for coming here today. Mr. Tupley, I'm going to politely decline your invitation to come back for the time being. If my experience at your gallery was any indication of the safe space you provide for everyone to participate, I wouldn't want to come back. There is clearly still a lot of misunderstanding in the community about the process and the proposal. So I want to invite all of you to visit Winta Johannes in my office. She's my liaison to civic life. She has been working closely on this issue since the beginning, and hopefully she can clear up some of the confusion that you have. We have a busy agenda today. I'm not going to have a conversation from the dais with you, but that's the first step, would be you talking to Winta. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda, Carla?
We've had no requests.
Call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please, 958.
Accept the quarterly technology oversight committee report from the chief administrative officer.
Colleagues, the Technology Oversight Committee, or TOC, was established in 2011 for the purpose of providing citizen oversight on city technology projects that have a substantial impact on city operations, especially projects that are either high risk or high cost. TOC members provide oversight and advise project staff throughout the project's implementation. Excuse me. Their purpose is to increase both transparency and accountability for the technological aspects of significant city projects and to identify any potential issues as early in the process as possible. The TOC reports monthly to the Chief Administrative Officer, who then submits reports to the City Council on a quarterly basis. So today we're receiving a status update on projects that are currently under TOC oversight, as well as a summary of the quality assurance assessments. The TOC is comprised of individuals who possess impressive technology backgrounds and extensive experience with project implementation. On that note, I'm very pleased to see that our last original member is here with us today. Wilf Pinfold represents my office and has been serving the TOC for 8.5 years. Wilf, welcome. And thank you for your many years of service to the city. Senior Management Analyst and TOC Staff Liaison Heather Hafer is also here to help present this quarter's report. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. Nice to see you, Commissioners. I, too, am very pleased that Wilf is joining us here today. Wilf provides the TOC with extensive experience and professional oversight into managing complex technology projects, and I think that benefits our entire organization. So we are incredibly thankful for your time. I am equally pleased to be joined by a familiar face, Jeff Baer, who serves as your Chief Technology Officer. Jeff provides the city's managerial oversight of TOC projects and, in my humble opinion, does a fantastic job of doing so. As the mayor said, TOC members represent each elected official. In addition to Wilf, Diana Garcia represents Commissioner Fritz, Victoria Trapp represents Commissioner Hardesty, Jimmy Goddard represents Commissioner Udaly, and Leland Nell is our newest member who represents Commissioner Fish, and I hope to introduce him to you in January. The TOC oversaw 2 projects during this last reporting period, which was from July through September. Those 2 projects were the Portland Online Permitting System and Open and Accountable Elections. We'll be presenting the project's dashboard so you can see an overall rating of these projects from both the TOC and the quality assurance perspectives, but both Wilf and Jeff are here to provide you with additional project information and answer any questions that you might have.
Heather, we have that amendment we need to do before that PowerPoint.
Yes.
There's an amended Exhibit A that was in the Tuesday memo.
Am I reading that?
I'm sorry, there is an amendment?
To Exhibit A, was in the Tuesday memo, page 4.
So on the dashboard, or you're seeing the POPs rating sheet, unfortunately, there's a tremendous amount of copying and pasting that goes along with this reporting, and you originally saw the TOC's assessment in July for POPs as yellow, yellow, green, and green. It actually is yellow, green, and green.
So do we need a motion to substitute the exhibit?
That would work, yes.
All right, I so move.
Second.
We have a motion, second from Udaly. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote. I'm sorry. Call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Wheeler?
Substitutes on the table, aye.
Thank you.
I did, aye.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler and members of City Council. I'm Jeff Farrar, the Director of the Bureau of Technology Services, and as was introduced, we're here with our TOC member, Dr. Wilf Penfold, here to provide some updates to the report since it only covers the July through September timeframe, and there have been a lot of different activities that have occurred since the project reporting period ended. We're also here to answer any questions or concerns you may have regarding any of these projects. Just to focus a little bit on POPS, or the Portland Online Permitting System, it continues to move forward towards a Q1 2020 go-live for the main permitting system. Both the QA and the TOC members are assessing the project in both yellow and green status. The project team has been actively hosting Amanda roadshows, really to highlight the system features. We've got foundational courses, and the learning labs are now available for employees to start taking advantage of for the testing and training that will occur over here over the next few months. Bureau of Development Services Director Esau and I meet weekly with the project team to review project status, risk, and different issues as they occur to make sure we are addressing those as they pop up as they occur each week. The user acceptance testing, UAT as it's known, is a real significant phase, and that will also be beginning soon.
I'm sorry,
here
could I
for-
interrupt for just one moment? Commissioner Hardesty had
I'm
a
sorry.
question.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Two questions. One, Amanda is an acronym, right? We're not talking about Commissioner Amanda Fritz, right?
That is correct.
All right. And would you actually tell us what the acronym stands for so that the listening public?
I have tried for probably the last year,
No,
Commissioner.
I found it last time. It's something
It's
like
product.
it's automated. It's the first letter is automated.
Okay.
I'll look it up again.
Well, let the record reflect we're not talking about Commissioner Fritz.
I think we should from
taking
now on.
note
It's my project.
I like the fact that you're on this vote show, right? But I just wanted to clarify that. Can you tell me what changed between July and August that gave you less confidence in the POPS project as it relates to the budget?
Yeah, so the budget was, the overall project budget itself did not change, but there were questions about some of the line items, expenses that were attributed to different expenses that we had to go back and reconcile. So bottom line, the number didn't change, it was just reconciling those different expenses.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
Just to report on the Development Hub PDX, or Dev Hub, as noted in the report, we went live on July 1st. We retired the system in August, and customers are now applying for permits through this online permitting website. Reports indicate this is very well received, so that is going very well.
So, excuse me, I beg to differ on that. I tried last night to get a street tree pruning permit, which previously I had been able to do with absolutely no difficulty, and I couldn't do it.
Okay,
So,
we'll follow up on that.
If you could, please.
And was that a tree permitting?
Yeah, a street tree pruning permit, which previously was very easy to do through the Parks website. When I clicked on the Parks website, it sends me to this development hub. I clicked on every single link and couldn't find a way to do it.
We'll get back to it,
Thank
find
you.
out what happened on that.
I did send her an inquiry, so I'll update my colleagues on, I'm sure Development Services and Technology Services will make sure that customers are given training if we're not using it correctly.
Thank you for that. I just want to also follow up on these different activities that I noted about. These are really more internal facing to talk about how do we train staff to be able to use the system. But also BDS has been working directly with the Development Review Advisory Committee, which is also known as the DRAC, and as well as their Customer Advisory Committee to keep them apprised of the different activities that are occurring with the POPS implementation. So overall, I think the team and I and Director Esau and I are feeling really good about the progress we're making and heading towards a launch period in February next year. And Wilf, if you have anything to add, you'd like?
Yeah, I would actually like to add something. I think both these projects represent a shift that's going on in the way that the city looks at software, and I think it's in line with where the rest of the industry is moving. And that's moving away from thinking of software really as an item, as a product that you buy and you purchase and then you have it for a period of time and then it's out of date. And a good way to think about this is, in the old days we would go out and buy Windows and it was a package and it stayed stable for a long period of time. But today on your smartphones, typically there are updates coming for all of your apps on an ongoing basis. And to think about software more as a service than as a thing. It's really there to help members of the bureaus get their job done in an efficient way, and it should align with the processes that they are using to get their job done, which of course is a moving target. We're improving those processes and changing those processes on a regular basis. And both of these projects have taken a step in the right direction of moving towards that ongoing support. POPs, I think we have now reached a point where we are quite well aligned with the provider in delivering technology, and many of the challenges that we have in the next step are challenges that they have across their whole user base. So we're actually on the leading edge of their delivery, which I think is a good achievement to have reached. And the work that's been done on the open and accountable elections, one of the things you will see is that we have marked down the completion as uncertain. That's not actually necessarily a negative in our view. We would expect as we develop processes, as we understand what the potential weaknesses are, and as the process is used, we expect that package to advance. And the relationship that has been developed with Civic recognizes that and will continue to move it forward. So I would ask the Commission to think more about ongoing software efforts as purchasing a service rather than just purchasing an item, and think about it in that way. I think it will help us all as we go forward to think about these procurements that way and recognize that completion is not quite as crystal clear as it has been in the past.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update on the open accountable elections. The report that you see before you indicated that they had, Civic Software Foundation had delivered all components for implementation of what we were calling Plan B. I learned yesterday from Director Susan Motte that they have now delivered 100% for all of Plan A, with one exception, and that is for the auto notification process. So it's coming together, and I think it's really progressing well.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
We've got it and it's working, so.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I think I covered them both, and I would agree. I think that ongoing improvement to this, and I think there will be, and part of this is certification process, which is, do we know how it is that the tool is being used, and if there are any things that we're concerned about in ways that the process is being managed, we should have the option to add those as we go, in the same way as you would add patches to an application on your phone to ensure that security is maintained. Right. I would expect us to continue to do that with open and accountable elections on an ongoing basis.
I appreciate that clarification, and I had a question just about the way we're reporting out information. And I realize it's a quarterly report, and it's my understanding that there was a deadline for this report that was approximately, September 19th?
Yes, you mean the completion of the various features.
So we have red reflected here in our official report here, close to the end of October, but we're hearing a verbal confirmation from you that a lot of the issues that led this to be red are now either yellow or green. Is that a fair assessment?
Let me add a little bit to that as well. I think that's the correct understanding, but let me add a little context to that because I think it would help. At the beginning of this project, we realized the time schedule was very tight. And the objectives that were being laid out were quite stringent. In other words, if we met the full completion of the project, that would be fairly remarkable in the time that was available. Right. And so as a group, we said, if you want this completion, we think it's red. And you've seen that throughout. However, we all strongly supported doing the project because the alternative is a manual process. Mm-hmm. And the manual process would be very burdensome. And even fairly early on in the project, it was fairly clear that we could do a fairly significant percentage of that manual work automatically, and that would be an enormous benefit. And I think the deadline that you're talking about, we had about 80% of that manual work covered by this process, which for us, knowing where we started, we felt was actually quite good. We still marked it, negatively because we didn't want to set expectations that it was going to be complete. We never believed that it would be complete on time. We believed that it would be a significant benefit over the alternative of manual.
But at least the trend lines are good.
Yes.
And it's working. I mean, it's so exciting. And I need to give a shout out to Civic Software Foundation and their volunteers. I mean, we've got the automated system for permits, which has been going as long as I've been on the council, I think, or nearly that long, and is still not quite ready to implement. And this system, which is somewhat complex, has been done largely by volunteers and got done so that it was ready to use the day that the program opened for candidates.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think something else that I think is very attractive about this, because it is open and because there are volunteers who are able to work on this, things like some of the visualizations will happen through community activity.
Yeah.
And they will be very beneficial. I know that some of our press who would like to be able to monitor the process will be very delighted that when they start to raise questions, that we can create visualizations that let them take a look at what is happening within the election. And I think that's very healthy for our democracy, an ability to be able to say, okay, something's going on here. Can we visualize it in some way and have a civically conscious group come up with a visualization that lets us look at it better without, burdening cost on the city and the taxpayer, which I think is an excellent place to be in.
Great. Thank you. And I did find that Amanda stands for Application Management and Data Automation. So there we are.
Amanda sounds so much more exciting.
Not feeling like a robot, but there we are.
This is the first time you're going to hear me speak in favor of the acronym.
That's right, but Commissioner Hardesty will.
I never need to hear that again.
Thank you very much. I just want to just really appreciate the volunteers on the TOC. The resources that you provide to the city are priceless. Your expertise that you're willing to bring on a volunteer basis over and over and over again really has helped us to actually, for those of us who are not and I say this kindly, tech geeks, right? Those who are not tech geeks, you help us understand, right, actually what we're investing in and what we should expect the outcomes to be. And I love your cautious nature, because when I watch the red go to yellow and then go to green, I know that we've accomplished something. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I am greatly appreciative.
Thank you all. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes.
It does.
Any further questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to accept the report from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Hardesty. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Daly?
Thank you for the report and for your work. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for being here, Mr. Pinfold, and for your comments. You've been so supportive throughout this experience. Thank you to Cliff Smith, who provides quality assurance oversight for the open and accountable elections technology. And Civic Software, as we say, thank you to the whole Technology Oversight Committee, and particularly thank you to Open and Accountable Elections Director Susan Motet, who has worked incredibly hard to get this program going in record time, and I'm really excited that it is. Aye.
Fish?
Well, thank you for the presentation, and I also appreciate the perspective that you shared with us about software, and thinking about it a little differently, thinking of it as a service. I think that's something that we need to ponder as we go forward. But this exercise that we go through quarterly, where we get these reports that are easy to understand, that are color-coded, I think is the model for how we should do a lot of oversight in this city. And I thank you for your service. Aye.
Hardesty?
I just want to say that you reported today on 2 projects that caused the most angst with the public. The permitting process and who has the privilege of running and serving in public office. Neither of those tasks are easy, and you have brought us along every step of the way. I am honored to vote aye in favor of your report, and I want to thank you once again for your work.
Wheeler?
This is a process that works really well. I really appreciate everybody's service. I vote aye. The report's accepted. We'll see you next quarter. Thank you again.
Unless something weird happens and you need to come earlier.
Thank you.
Like I said, we'll see you next quarter. Next item, please, 959.
959. Authorize a grant agreement with United Way of the Columbia Willamette in an amount not to exceed $600,000 for Portland-directed activities within a coordinated statewide hard-to-count campaign for the 2020 census.
Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, I'm pleased to introduce this next item. Today, we will be...
Excuse me, Commissioner.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I noticed that this is a time-certain item, and it's not quite 10:15 yet.
Oh, that clock's slow.
It's 10:12.
It's 10:12.
Okay.
All right, let's go to a, do
Up
we have
to
a
Mayor.
second reading? Hang on. Of course we don't. We'll take a 3-minute recess,
Okay.
and I will refill my coffee. How about that?
That is a fine idea. I will do likewise. I think something bad would happen if we started before.
I think you should have stuck with my...
We're not allowed to.
But I do
We're not allowed to.
We are back in session. It is now 10:16, according to the large novelty clock in the back of the room. Commissioner Udaly.
Colleagues, I'm pleased to introduce this next item. Today, we will be voting to authorize a $600,000 grant agreement with United Way to support the 2020 census preparation efforts. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their support of the census budget requests. This work is vitally important, and I'm proud of the City of Portland's contribution to the effort. I'll have more to say about that after the presentation. Joining us today to share more about how Portland fits into the We Count Oregon campaign are Director Suk Ree, who I actually just saw walk into my office, not council chambers. Here she is. From the Office of Community and Civic Life, Amanda Whalen from United Way, and Esperanza Trevon Garrett of Dancing Hearts Consulting. Please come forward to the table.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just want to see.
Good morning, our elected officials, our colleagues, and our community members, including Spirit of Portland honoree last night, Angela Harris. My name is Sukri, and I serve as Director for the Office of Community Civic Life. This presentation is to provide you the context and the update that you need to authorizing a transfer of $600,000 to the United Way as our fiscal sponsor for the Census 2020 work. I'm just going to give you a quick update. There is a slide deck that they are arranging to load with the council clerk, but my remarks do not need a PowerPoint presentation. So last year, council allowed for 3 investments in the 2020 census. The first was a $225,000 award in the fall 1819 fall bump. And then council allowed Civic Life to redirect $125,000 in general fund resources in the spring bump. And then in the fiscal 1920 budget, council committed an additional $250,000 for a total investment of $600,000. And the first $20,000 of city funds were pledged to hire a statewide census equity coordinator with the Census Equity Funders Committee of Oregon. Sometimes we refer to them as CEFCO. And the CEFCO is comprised of the region's philanthropic private funders. So CEFCO then chose a community-led proposal to work with Dancing Hearts Consulting in January, who then worked with multiple entities to develop a campaign plan from February to June. At the same time, in that same period, CEFCO and Dancing Hearts used this plan to secure an additional $7.5 million from the state of Oregon, now toward a total $10 million investment in Heart to Count, in a Heart to Count campaign statewide. I'm going to pause for a moment there because this is actually the first time this has actually happened in our state's history. And council's first investment through the fall bump last year was the critical step that enabled all of us to leverage early and limited dollars toward a $10 million outcome. And so thank you for that. Today, we request your support for transferring the city's $600,000 to the fiscal agent for CEFCO. And Amanda Whalen from the United Way of the Columbia Willamette will share information about the Census Equity Fund and the CEFCO partnership. And then Esperanza Tervalon Garrett of Dancing Hearts Consulting will talk about the We Count campaign implementation plan. So if we are ready to load, thank you for your help and Thank you so much. Wonderful. So Amanda will.
So thank you very much for having us here this morning. I'm Amanda Whalen, Chief Impact Officer at United Way, and I'm here representing CEFCO and the Census Equity Fund. So the Census Equity Funders Committee of Oregon is a collaborative of philanthropic organizations that have been working together for almost 2 years now to address the hard to count issue here in Oregon. And we are looking at a $10 million overall statewide campaign that's part of a larger $14 million campaign that's trying to make sure that all of the Oregonians are counted in the census.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So the Census Equity Fund, what you have in front of you in this slide is our operating sort of thoughts on how we move forward. A couple of things I want to point out. What we've done is we've created an aligned pooled fund, which is able to remove barriers for community-based organizations and have one place where they're applying for funding in order to do field and community-based work to ensure that our hardest to count populations are reached. Second, as far as we know, this is the only private and public pooled fund in the country. So a number of states are running private funds and public funds in order to reach hard to count. But as far as we know, this is the only place where we are doing that sort of aligned work where CBOs can apply to one single place. Finally, a part of our work is also going to be the evaluation and the gear up for 2030. So one of the things that we found was that a number of states, Minnesota in particular, had started much earlier than we had. 2 years ago seems like a long time in preparation for this, but what we now know is by gathering this aligned group and doing this work, we're able to get ready again and be more prepared for 2030, which is an exciting thought.
Let's hope we'll have federal help in 2030, huh?
Agreed. So in November of 2018, we put out an RFP for a statewide equity coordinator, and we're lucky enough to have a group of organizations from around the state who applied to run the campaign. They nominated Dancing Hearts Consulting to be the lead applicant for that coalition, and in May, they developed a Hard to Count campaign that I believe has been shared with you already. So I just wanted to update you on where we are around these funds raised for the campaign. So as Sook had said, we are looking at a $10 million Hard to Count campaign fund. CEFCO had an early $1 million pledge, and as you can see, we are almost to that $1 million pledge, and that's from private philanthropy. We have another $8.1 million that is so far committed from public funds, and so our total pledge is almost $9 million. Total committed is almost $9 million, and then it's almost 9.4 in terms of pledged. So we're anticipating we have approximately about $600,000 more to raise in order to reach our Hard to Count campaign goal.
So have no other local jurisdictions, cities or counties contributed apart from the City of Portland?
Not have contributed to the fund directly. We have other jurisdictions that have set aside dollars, but have yet to contribute directly to the fund.
Can I mention that in the 1920 budget, the Multnomah County matched the city's commitment of $250,000 as well.
So
And
that's
we're also-
included in the pledges on this?
Is it included in the pledges? Yes.
Thank you.
So United Way, as Sook mentioned, is we are providing backbone support to CEFCO and to the Census Equity Fund. Currently, what we're doing is continuing to provide that support to Dancing Hearts Consulting. We're funding and contracting with those 13 partner organizations that are leading the field campaign. We're also supporting Portland State University, the Population Research Center, and they're doing a ton of data work that's preparing for the campaign. And we're also preparing for the Census Assistance Center at RFP. So those will be Census Assistance Centers in all 36 counties of the state that will be providing support to communities. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Hello, my name is Esperanza Turvalon-Garrett, and I am the CEO of Dancing Hearts Consulting. I am the first woman of color and black woman in the country to run a C3, C4 PAC focused on turning out voters of color, and I live in Ashland. I'm a mother, a wife, and a horsewoman, and it's a real honor to be here, so thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the We Count Oregon mission and campaign. We're a really different kind of campaign for a different era. This campaign is being run by Black, Indigenous, and women of color. We are a campaign that is putting race and culture first. It's centered in the campaign. It is not secondary or ancillary. We believe that using trusted messengers with tailored messages are how we're going to move about 1 million hard-to-count communities to understand, be educated around, and compelled to take the census. So I think you all know this, but just a quick refresher. A hard-to-count community is a community that has a less than 76% self-response rate in the first few weeks of the census. Generally speaking, those are people of color, renters, immigrants, children under 5, and people with limited English proficiency. I should just tell you, in Oregon, for example, some of those communities, 38% of Oregonians are renters, for example. 6% we think of children, 6% of Oregon's population are children under 5. We think about 25% of the state population are people of color. So we know that they're pretty large demographics.
I just have a quick
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
I'm fascinated by children under 5 being hard to count.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they be hard to count?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So for a couple of reasons, often newborn babies are sometimes not thought of as yet part of the family. And so we see kids under 1 often being undercounted or just left off, just not sort of counted. The other piece is, that's been a big one that's come up for us is around co-parenting. So if a person is co-parenting with a partner, what we're telling folks is that if you have that child on April 1st, then you count them. And so sometimes in the shared family and rearing of children cannot be claimed because nobody knows who's supposed to claim them. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the impact of not counting children 0 to 5 means that those children up to the time they're 15 or 20 we won't receive the resources we need to make sure they're educated and supported. So the impact is huge, and it's a long-lasting impact, a decade of impact. want to talk a little bit about the partner organizations and how this came to be. We are so fortunate to partner with these 13 organizations, and recently, I think people have been asking, well, how did you apply for this? And I said, well, I didn't apply for this. I got a call over the winter break from some really amazing organizers who said, listen, we absolutely believe that we're already working in hard-to-count communities. We think that these communities should continue to be in communication with us about this really important democratic process. And we are interested in trying some new things. We know we want to use field-focused strategies. I had worked with them, and we said we'd like to try a new hit at this. And so I said, well, okay, sure. They said, oh, don't worry, it'll be totally easy. And here we are, really excited to see you for the second time. And so, it has not been easy, but I will say that when we look at this plan, I'm so fortunate to be able to be the person who represents us as the lead consultant, and I'm happy to carry some of this work alongside of them. And none of this is possible without their leadership, their contribution. Their fingerprints are all over this plan, and we created this together. So just want to acknowledge that. We do have partners. I just want to let you know that, as Amanda was saying, our campaign really is different, and it's being lifted up in a lot of different spaces for being so different. We are one of the few Black, Indigenous, women of color-led consultants on a campaign across the country. In fact, we don't know of any other that have an all-women shop or all-women of color shop. And we decided that we wanted to partner with the best of the best. So we work with PSU, the Population Research Center, and that team to make sure that all of our information is correct. So they do all of our fact-checking, and then we do deep dive, like data nerd stuff that you don't want to know about to prepare us for when we actually do the count and how to report that. We work with SCAN, the State Count Action Network, which is made up of Asian American Pacific Islander Advancement Project and the Leadership Council and State Voices. And we're basically a part of a national network that has done a ton of polling around what messages work, what's moving folks. And then the Funders Census Initiative is where we're learning from other consultants around the country about what they're working on, what other consultants are working on, and how they're moving census in their places. So our campaign goals are lofty, 200,000 hard-to-count contacts. A contact is not a knock. How many of you know knocks? You use knock in yeah, we're not doing knocks. That's about how much energy you put out. We're curious about how many people you talk to. We're going to partner with 100 organizations. We're going to train 10,000 people, and we're going to have 50,000 people participate in a text account program. Don't worry, I'm going to pitch it to you later since we're on television and I have slides. There are 4 main parts to the campaign infrastructure, which we've been building since July, and that's really about our data and sort of campaign space and all the trainings and technologies that we need to move this campaign. We're doing a ton of education and training. In fact, yesterday we had our first webinar for Census 101. We had 156 people register and 128 people show up. So the conversion rate, the actual percentage at which people are participating is extremely high. We're developing pretty strong communications. Our communications are persuasive, they are in multiple language, and they're targeted for constituencies. So the language for children under 5, for example, will be different than the language for Black immigrants. And then we're focusing on field. I was asked to talk mostly about field, so that's what I'm going to pinpoint here. If you want to ask other things, happy to do that during question and answer. We're in a preparation period right now where we are all learning about the census, and we are doing our work to put in place our field plans. January to April will be an education phase. Mostly you'll see trainings and opportunities for people to sort of learn about the census. We call April to August activation, and that's where we'll be running on a 100-day campaign to reach 200,000 people. And then what impact will be after we have agreed to do a ton of evaluation. Because there's not a lot of information or knowledge known in this state about census, we want to make sure that we do a good job, like really being critical about what worked and what didn't.
Sorry.
What's an example of some of the egregious misinformation about the 2020 census?
Sure. So recently, actually, I think just last week, a mailer came out from the RNC asking people to donate, but it had the census information all over it. So it said Census 2020 is one example. And so we put out a mailer. Oregon is probably the 15th state to be targeted for this. It's actually, there's a federal law prohibiting anyone from sending mail through the U.S. Postal Service that says census, that is not census related. And so we put out a mailer to let people know that this was not in fact a census form, that they did not have to fill this out. It had a number that you were supposed to go and put into a website. And so that information is on our website. We sent out a mailer, so we got the information, we sent out an email within 24 hours to let people know this is not a real thing, and to try and make sure that we are giving people the right information so that they can make well-informed choices, and frankly, aren't fearful, right? Fear is a huge issue that we're combating with a lot of the communities that we're working with.
How did you determine that the RNC was behind that flyer?
Oh, it has their name on it.
And who are they coordinating with in the state of Oregon?
You know, it was unclear. The person who got it was a Democrat, and so we don't think that it's not necessarily partisan, but it is. They've been flooding, and they started in New York. I would say we saw this and tracked it through our partners at SCAN. We tracked it last, I guess maybe in May. We saw the first one fall in New York, and so we knew it was coming, and we're prepared to respond.
So it's the Republican National Committee is sending out illegal mailings. Is the Oregon State Attorney General going to sue them?
You know, I don't know
has
what
somebody
their,
complained?
I don't know what the plan is around pushing back against this. Again, it's a national push. I think that the envelope and the framing and the messaging on it talks about the census as an entry point, and then it becomes clear that it's actually a fundraising email.
So have your organization complained to the Attorney General?
We have not.
I would like you to do that, please.
Sure, I appreciate the recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about Portland, because I know that you all love Portland, just like I do. So, you know, I had a request, so I just want to acknowledge that Sook made an amazing request for me to get some real deep dive data on Portland. Who and where and what languages and how many and, you know, what would be the percentage. And I talked to Jason, we talked for about an hour. And I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but to tell you, it would take us about a year to put that kind of disaggregated data together for you. And the process through which we would do that would be to look at 2017 data. And we are actually 6 months away from just doing the census. So we want to ask that you all offer some grace to us in not being able to provide that level of data, which would both be out of date and is exactly what we're here to talk with you about today. We are sort of starting at a baseline. The data that we're using is a little old, and 2020 is the time for us to count new people. And we have some projection, we have some ideas about what the demographics will look like and where we should target, but we will, you know, we conduct this process every 10 years so that we can be sure. And that's where we are. Here's what I can tell you about our campaign in Portland. 10 of the 13 organizations will be focused here. Each organization will be hiring a paid team. We project that about 150 short-term temporary jobs will be we will have that many jobs here in Portland, about 150. They pay $17 per hour, and folks will work for 100 days. We also know that we have targeted trainings for communities happening mostly in Portland, although in the metro area for, you know, the Tri-County for sure. And 2 of our staff are based here in Portland. Both our field director and our training, our community engagement staff person are here in Portland. And our final piece was that we will have an office here. So we're deeply committed to making sure that this city is counted. We think there's a lot here, a lot of communities, a lot of connections, and our trusted messengers with the right messages can move those folks.
Before you move off that map, as is often the case with city staff, my neighborhood's not on the map. It's too far south, and there is it's maybe the demographics of that census tract are not such that it shows up as a hard to count, but there are a significant immigrant and refugee population. So it's West Portland Park, and it's the intersection of I-5, Barber, and Capitol Highway. And if, as I say, you know, if we're looking to find hard to count populations, it's going to be, in some cases, the populations which are concentrated but swamped by not hard to count populations.
I'm so glad that you raised that. This is not the map that we will use to go out and talk to folks in Portland. These are the hard to count tracts from 2010 that show the degree to which they required additional in-person engagement. We know that there are hard to track counts, so we will be in these areas, but we know that they're hard to count people all over. We're not going to get 1 million people out of these little neighborhoods. And frankly, if you pulled back the map, we aren't going to get 1 million out of that either. So we are doing an overlay between geography and demographics to fuse together this statewide campaign. We think that our target universe, the total number of people that we'll reach out to, is right around 860,000 people through phones, doors, and cell phone information.
Are you looking at schools, particularly elementary schools, and the demographics served by those schools?
So traditionally and historically, yes and no. Traditionally and historically, the Oregon Complete Count, whatever the complete count is for a state, is responsible for working with government entities and all of the agencies funded by the state. So schools, libraries, all of these things would fall under the complete count. They're still developing their plan, and we're really excited to partner with them when we have more clarity. We are putting together and working with organizations that work with children and families would be more our shtick. But we are happy to fill whatever gaps need to be filled so that children are counted.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for the information. Who is going to be counting people who are houseless in our community?
Thank you so much for asking. So actually, there are some communities that we do not provide forms for, and houseless folks would be in that demographic. Indigenous people, Native people, tribal people will also be enumerated in person. And so the U.S. Census Bureau will send someone out to places where they understand houseless people to be, and they will count them in person there.
Let me just say that they're not going to have a lot of success because people who are houseless don't talk to people who say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It would really be important to partner with organizations who already have a relationship with folks who are houseless. So and quite frankly, you will find in the population of people who are houseless, the hard to count population that we say that we're targeting. So I would hope that you would add one or two organizations that actually have a relationship with folks who are houseless as part of the team. And then, whatever the federal government does, when and if they show up, hopefully adds value.
Thank you.
And sorry, and as we mentioned a little bit earlier, there is an opportunity for those organizations to apply to be a census assistance center as well. So, one thing is that as people are coming to get services, setting up those computers in the lobbies in order to help people complete forms if possible, if they're coming in, which I know is a whole other issue as well. So it's also going out to where people are.
I was going to say, ma'am,
Yeah,
they're not going to come to you, right?
I know.
Which is why it's really important to, and when you say have them apply, I think it's the responsibility of the Complete Count Committee to actually identify those organizations, work with them to develop an application, and then help them do the hardest job that there is in census, which is counting folks who don't have a house, right? So I think that we have to do something different if we're really intent on counting folks who today don't have a roof over their head.
That's right.
Commissioner Daly.
Esperanza, could you explain what you meant by not having forms for a houseless population?
Sure. So the process for the census is that people will get a mailing from the federal government. It will have a web address because we are taking an online census form this year, or 2020, and he'll have a URL basically that you go to, and you'll get six mailings with an opportunity to respond to that before an enumerator comes to your home. In the case where people do not have homes, the federal government has decided to enumerate them, which was the process until about the 60s when you have the first mail-in census, and that process is where people would it's problematic. It's a process through which the federal government sends a paid staff person called an enumerator to come and count you. And so they might say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people here. And they'll say they're at this intersection, under this bridge, in this park, et cetera. They will write that on the form, and that will count for those people.
So this isn't a case of us not treating people equally or wanting to count this population, but the process is somewhat prescribed by the federal government.
It is, and a little bit and unjust and not equal and unfair.
Okay.
But it is the process that the federal government has set forth to date.
But that doesn't preclude us from doing outreach to that population, correct?
You're right. And we, for example, are partnering with the Oregon Food Bank and other sort of service agencies and adjunct. I don't think that gets to Commissioner Hardesty's question, which I think is a good one, and I'm happy to revisit.
Okay, I'm also really interested in this
Yeah.
subject, but I understand that list that we saw of hard-to-count populations doesn't include every hard-to-count population. It's the most significant populations that we're targeting to try to get to the most complete count possible.
Right. Houseless people are not included in the hard-to-count traditional bucket at all, because they would not have homes. It's based on the 76% response rate.
And
which
again,
only
that's
happens-
not our definition.
It is not.
That is the federal government.
That's correct.
Okay,
Commissioner
thank you.
Hardesty, then Commissioner Fish. Commissioner Fish.
So, before you're finished with your excellent presentation, can someone, for the benefit of the public,
Yes.
just take a moment to explain why this is important?
Sure.
Because I think sometimes people don't connect the dots. I mean, we know, for example, that if we get a good count this time, we may get an extra congressional seat. So that adds to clout in Washington, D.C. We know that there are a lot of programs the federal government funds based on a formula. So your population determines how much you get of an entitlement. But I think it's helpful to use this forum just to remind people of what's really at stake here. And why, what is the big win for our community if we get an honest count?
May I? You did a great job, by the way, so thank you so much.
I just did the ones I knew off the top of my head.
Those are all the ones. You did all the things. One example, I think one important thing to remember is that for each person that we count, the state of Oregon will receive $3,200 in federal funding for each person. In 2016, federal funding made up $13 billion of Oregon's state general fund. That is a huge amount. And so we know that these federal dollars are coming in because people in Oregon rely on federal services like Medicaid and SNAP, public transportation dollars. And so there's a direct connection between participating in the census and literally the tax dollars, the money that gets to be in our own pockets. And so leaving anyone out has a fiscal impact on all of our lives. I think the other piece is around apportionment. We expect to count about 450,000 new Oregonians in this state. And it is not only a clout in DC, it's actually a constitutional right to have representation. When we have more population, we are deserving of a seat in Congress to make sure that everyone's needs are reflected in the debates that happen and shape all of our lives.
I know that in my birth state of New York, they're bracing for the loss of some congressional districts. So we have a chance to pick up another congressional seat, which would be huge for Oregon. I think that $3,200 per person number is easy to understand and really, really compelling. We should probably allocate some additional money so that we'll offer people up to $3,100 to do the census, because we'll still get $100 out of it. But that's a very compelling, compelling number, and I think that's easy for people to understand, and that those dollars then flow to programs they care about. So I thank you for reducing it to something that's bite-sized, and I think that's part of the messaging we should help you with.
Before I get to Commissioner Hardesty, can I get a time check? How far through your presentation are you?
I can be done.
Very good, Commissioner
I
Hardesty.
want to make sure that I talk about census assistance centers.
Yeah, good.
If you have
It's a
questions,
great
but
conversation.
please go
I
ahead.
don't want to
Let's
cut
have
it
a
off. I just
conversation.
wanted
I'm here to
get a
do
sense.
whatever
Thank
is
you.
helpful.
You bet. Commissioner
Thank you.
Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. So it occurred to me, so people, is the census based on your physical street address?
So there are 50 questions that have been standard on the census since it was initiated in 1790. And the questions include your name, your address, a phone number, your relationship to the head of household, and your social security number. We know that in this climate of fear, these questions feel scary. Whether you're a citizen or non-citizen, I feel afraid about what is possible by providing this information. I do want to offer that Title 13 does protect us under federal code that that information shall not be used in court cases by the government or for any purpose that individuates you. So it should not be able to see your individual information, and anyone who violates that law is subject to 5 years in prison, a $250,000 fine, or both.
So I asked that question because to register someone to vote, they don't actually have to have a physical street address. You can register someone to vote who's in a county jail. You can register people to vote using community services as their address for them to pick up their ballot. And so what I'm trying to understand is what case would you make to someone who is houseless? Why it's important for them to fill out the census material?
Well, again, they won't fill out the census
right,
material,
right,
but
right.
they will be counted by someone who's identifying them and doing a number count and identifying them to a location,
Right.
maybe under a bridge or
Right.
in a park.
Are they also doing demographic information? So are they looking at you and me and saying, oh, they're both African Americans who live under this bridge, or?
I do not know that information, but I'm happy to talk to the census folks and know more.
I would love to know more about that.
Sure.
Yes. I'm sorry, what my original question was, so what happens if with no address?
So they are marked as living under the bridge, some number of people. That becomes the physical location, whatever the coordinates are for that location. It could be a park, it could be whatever, and that is what gets submitted. There are kind of two ways that this is happening. One is called self-response, and that's the form that you're going to get where you tell them, hey, this is my information, this is who I am. And then there's enumeration where they come, and it is true that in the past, the history was very racist and terrible, where someone would show up and say that you were, for a while, black, white, or mulatto, and those were the options. And so, that leaves some questions about how we will get race data and other important demographic about gender and sexuality from that. No, I'm sorry, not sexuality, but gender and sex from that form. But I don't actually know their process. And again, our campaign is really about the community-led effort to connect trusted messengers with communities that they're working in. But these are important questions that I think need to be answered.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
If someone's mailing address is a post office box or Sisters of the Road, do they get the form delivered there?
Where's your form delivered? That's a really good question. It is supposed to go to your home address. It's a little bit problematic, for example, for renters, right, who might get a piece of mail coming and it'll say the name of the homeowner instead of the folks who live there. It is supposed to go to your home to the mailbox address, not the PO box.
Okay. And then I think I heard this when a similar presentation at Metro Policy Advisory Committee, that you don't have to fill out every question.
That is true.
So are there any mandatory questions?
It's a good question. We have been trying to get a clear answer from that right now. I think it's unclear still. I will say this about the census. I have been working on the census now. This is my second round, so I'm at least 10 years in. And after 10 years and 20 years in my field, I definitely am an expert, but I am no authority. And the current government is making it very challenging to get clear answers to get clear answers. And so I can tell you what I know, but not what I don't.
But the goal of the census is to get a count of the people, regardless of whether they're documented or undocumented. Is that
That's
correct? So you wouldn't have to put a social security number, for example, if you didn't happen to have one.
You would think.
Okay, got that. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment about that? The discipline that Esperanza has just showed about what we can and what we should and should not say, and also what we're legally held to, is part of the ambassador's training. Everyone, volunteers, community leaders alike, that are talking about the census in the Hard to Count campaign will go through census education and training, because it is not good to have inconsistent responses to very difficult questions. And we want to make sure our campaign is completely legal and completely consistent, because that helps create a somewhat lessened state of fear in response.
Very good.
And we're going to ask for that discipline from all our community partners.
Very good. Commissioner Daly?
I just wanted to thank all of my colleagues for these questions.
Good.
Who would have thunk something as boring sounding as the census, which is just data collection. It's vital statistics. But it is so profoundly important, and this particular census is so fraught I'm very interested in this issue around the homeless count because we struggle as a city to get an accurate count of our own homeless population. I think we can help, and I'm wondering if there's any way to connect with or collaborate with the federal government, the enumerators, and Commissioner Fish's questions about what this means, I think is so important to convey, because there are people who, whether they distrust the government, whether they face barriers to participating, whether they're just really busy, and this is one more task and burden for them to deal with in the course of their day, that's a lot to overcome. And I know from personal experience, when you feel like the system is not serving you and you will not get your needs met by this person who's coming and asking to take your time and energy, a lot of people are not likely to want to give that time. And, you know, Oregon has a booming economy, yet we are almost dead last in mental health services, in addiction services. We have high food insecurity. We have low high school graduation. We have a statewide housing crisis. And it's just vitally important that we count every single person that we can to increase that funding and hopefully alleviate some of these issues. So thank you.
Very good.
Just one more question.
Commissioner Fritz, and then we'll get to public testimony.
Director Ray, I was just wondering, are you engaging the neighborhood associations and the district coalitions in encouraging them to sign up to be ambassadors?
We're engaging everyone. We need everyone's help on this.
Yeah, so it seems like you could combine some of the comments we had earlier. You know, neighborhood volunteers would not only get paid $17 an hour, but also be knocking on doors and saying, by the way, come to the meeting next week or whatever.
If that's allowed.
May I say one last thing? We will ask you for not just your vote today, but on November 12th, the Population Research Center and CEFCO are holding a census symposium at PSU, and one of the target audiences are elected officials. So we would like for you to join us there and also get your other colleagues there to have this important conversation in the state.
Do you know what time that is, Sue?
It's, I think it's an all-day event, 8 to 4 p.m., and the most important time for you to join is in the morning. Do you want to say anything else about that?
That was perfect.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very helpful. Carla, please call the first three. 3 minutes each, name for the record.
I show only two people signed up,
Very good.
Lightning and Maggie.
Very good. Come on up. Good morning. Maggie, would you like to start, please?
You know, someone a long time ago said to me, do something right or don't do it at all. And these women, collectively in conjunction with these agencies, are putting out a tremendous amount of effort. And I totally get the whole idea is to get those federal dollars, but for me, it's about what you're going to do with the federal dollars once you get them. And I see Indigenous peoples in shelters and on the street. I see people of color in the shelters and on the street. I see immigrants in the shelters and on the street. I see aging people who have lived here all their lives and are disabled, and they are on the street. Why are they not in housing if they have lived here all their lives? I see Cascadia, who apparently will admit to the fact that they use 65% of their budget to administrative costs. And then on top of that, then they use the shelters to shelter lifelong disabled people and aging people in with people who have addiction issues of meth and heroin and incarceration, have had incarceration and violent issues. Why are they in the shelter together? I want to know, United Way, they're doing a horrible job with 211. Everyone who's houseless hates 211. It doesn't do, it's completely useless. It's an abysmal service. It doesn't hook them up with housing or social services. And I'm talking about people who have been kicked out of shelter and have died, or have been kicked out and they ended up getting pneumonia from exposure. They were in a wheelchair, or they were kicked out because they went to county council to talk about unfair treatment because the staff that they hire for these places are untrained.
Maggie?
Yeah.
Good morning. How
Commissioner
are you?
Hurst.
I know, we're talking about the census.
Yes.
And we're
And
talking about what money you can get.
As you know, right, we are taking testimony on whether or not we should be investing in hard-to-count people. I know where your passion is. However, what is on the table at the moment is the census. Do you think that this is a good investment or not?
In 20 seconds or less.
If we could get away from some of these bad acting contractors that the government
Maggie?
looks away from,
Maggie,
and it's
we
what
are not talking about contractors today. We are talking about counting people so that we can get the resources we need.
I would say hire houseless people to count the houseless.
I think that's a great idea. Boom. Thank you, Maggie.
Okay.
You've
Thank you.
talked to the topic. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Data. One of the biggest concerns I have on the census is Commissioner Hardesty and I believe Commissioner Fish brought up some really good points, is that on that list of 5, you would have thought the hard to count would have definitely been the homeless community without any doubt. We're in a state of emergency. And the main thing from the city, the county, the state is to focus on the homelessness and the homeless themselves, on making sure they step up and they do the census survey. Now, it was quoted that there was 3,200 per person. I've heard another number of 1,200 per person. And we need to really narrow these numbers down to get a clear understanding what the real number is. And, on the federal assistance distributed using the Census Bureau data, to me, that's the most important issue here. When you're looking at the Section 8, when you're looking at housing for seniors, when you're looking at housing all across the board, if you don't get the numbers in, we lose that money. And then we have to go back to the general fund at the city and start pulling money and then start worrying about providing services. This, to me, is about the most important issue we've had in the city that I've ever seen, because that number has to be met. We need to get the people that are not being counted to understand, and I'm proposing that what we do for the homeless community is that if we can do this by law, and that'll need to be checked, we offer to pay them $20. You step forward and you do this, you receive $20 for participating. Now look at what Commissioner Fish stated. We need to check on that if there's, okay.
It's illegal to pay people to fill out a census document.
Okay, that's something to check, and I'll check on that too with attorneys. Now, my point is, what is the incentive for them to step forward and do this? You can say, we're going to lose 3,200, and they're going to say, well, I'm not going to appear. And that's a big deal here on how we could do that. Could we even work something out on that? Because, I mean, let's face it, the state put up, what, $7 million toward this. And there's other money being put up on the table too. And we need to look at something to really incentivize that hard-to-count population. I mean, we're in the digital community, the digital time, the technology is very advanced on using different software, Roam, Tiger, and different things on this issue. But the reality is we need to get people to be incentivized to do this. If we don't, the city loses big money on this. Huge money in the billions of dollars. When you start calculating and you look down at the numbers that are distributed, if we don't take this serious, probably the most serious thing we should, the amount of money we can lose to this city is tremendous.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. Any further business? Commissioner Daly?
Mayor, before we move on to the vote, I do have a couple clarifying questions, and I'm not sure which one of our panel could answer it.
Thanks,
One,
Lightning. Appreciate it.
I just wanted to add one more thing to Commissioner Fish, not to cut anyone off. If you
Well,
could check
you
on
did
that
cut me off,
monetary
but I
incentive
will
to see what the
grant you
legalities
that
are on that.
since
I'd like to finish my conversation and
Okay,
then
thank
I'll
you.
leave. Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much
Thanks
for your
for your
time.
testimony.
And thank you for your time, Commissioner Udale.
Maybe we could just have the panel come back quickly?
Yeah.
Commissioner Daly.
So we've heard a strong interest from the council and from public testimony in this issue around counting our homeless population. And as you explained, it's somewhat prescribed by the federal government. But I'm very interested in any way we can support or facilitate that process. So let's follow up on that. It's rare that Mr. Lightning and I agree on anything. And so when we do, I have a sense that it's vitally important. Let's keep.
The U.S. Census the Federal Bureau is actually hiring for enumerators. So I'm happy to connect you with Sarah, who is the lead person in the Bureau here in our region, to talk about what that might look like and how to distribute those job applications or processes.
Great.
So folks can apply.
That sounds like a great opportunity. Do any of you know what the estimated undercount was for the state of Oregon in the last census?
So we are not doing that. What I can tell you is what an undercount of 1% would have cost Oregon.
Okay.
It would have cost approximately $44.8 million, starting in fiscal year 2015 and every year thereafter. So it's extensive. And I wanted to speak to the gentleman's question. You're right, the numbers did change. In 2020, the federal amount for each person counted was right around $1,200. It was around there. And we are projecting for 2020 that the new number will be 3,200. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to clarify that.
That was my second question, but you said 2020. So in 2010, it was 1,200?
Correct.
And now it's being estimated at 32?
That's correct.
Okay. Any final?
And just for clarity, I mean,
Yeah.
one thing about the 2010 census is that was the most well-funded census in history. And there was still an undercount. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we can anticipate that this with the very underfunded census,
Yeah.
our challenges are
And just to make
exponential.
sure the subtlety of your answer wasn't missed, you cannot tell me what the estimated undercount
I
may
don't
have
know.
been.
I don't know the estimated undercount. There are many reports with differing numbers. What we feel is the most important thing for everyone to walk away with is that the census has already been clouded and in a shroud of controversy and miscommunication. There's huge misinformation coming in, and we only want to put out information that we feel 100% certain about. There's no reason to muddy the waters, and so where we are unclear or there isn't alignment in the sector, we would ask that we just not, unless it's critical. But I think these questions about the past are sort of in the past right now as we look to 2020.
Because Rebecca, we missed the last slide. I'm looking
I
at
know.
it.
You've
There's
got it
a, you can text Oregon to, what's the number?
Put it up?
I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we would love to get everyone to participate in our campaign. If you have a cell phone and you want to pull it out, you can text the word Oregon to 33339. You'll follow it to our WeCountOregon.com page. Go ahead and sign up on the link. It'll give you an opportunity to pledge to take the census. We will not overtext you. You can hit stop to stop receiving any time, but it will give you opportunities to get updates on the census, participate in events, and
Lets you know when the webinars are, too.
let you know when the webinars are.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, friends. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Carla, please call the roll.
Daly?
Well, I don't know if I feel better or worse about the fact that the federal government is possibly even worse at counting renters or engaging renters than the city of Portland, but I'm not going to forget that little detail. Thank you to Sook, Amanda, and Esperanza for that fantastic presentation. The census is an exciting opportunity because it's about affirming that our democracy gives every single person the right to be counted. Similar to the right to vote, the right to be counted is a basic right, and it is absolutely fundamental to our democracy, and it's vitally important to our state, both in federal funding and in political representation. We're fairly certain that the 2020 census will bring us an additional seat in Congress. But that depends on our ability to make sure that all community members know and believe this. This is why our limited financial resources must go towards reaching hard-to-count communities. All of us in this room, I think, understand the very real barriers to participation and the blatant attempts by the Trump administration to instill fear and confusion around the census, and it is absolutely reprehensible. This is why the coordinated campaign across multiple sectors is so critically important. Before I close, I want to highlight Director Ree's observation about the impact of Portland's early commitment. As elected city officials, we have an obligation to exercise fiscal responsibility over our limited funds. And yet we know that many of our most pressing issues are not neatly confined to the borders of our jurisdictions. Our communities expect that we will work together across jurisdictions, and this effort proves that leadership and sharing responsibility leads to better outcomes. So thank you, Sook. In closing, I'd like to thank all of our presenters today. Lauren and Esperanza, thank you for taking on such an important role in this work. It's a huge undertaking, but I have the utmost confidence in you and your teams to get this right. I also want to thank the Civic Life team, Shook, Marco, Perla, and Diane for getting us to this point and continuing to lead the work to coordinate through our Bureau. And finally, I feel like I should also thank Commissioner Stegman from Multnomah County, who was our county partner in the complete count. And finally, thank you, Sook, for your early identification of the census as a top priority. I honestly don't know if I would have identified it without your guidance, or at least identified it as early and as urgently important as you did. I want to acknowledge that $125,000 of these funds actually came from Sook scraping together savings from Civic Life's already tight budget when we couldn't get the full funding in the budget. And that type of commitment and your leadership in coordinating the city's efforts is to be commended. I am very pleased to vote aye.
Fritz.
Fascinating and important discussion. Thank you for coming from Ashland, and thank you for your leadership statewide. It's really great that we've got this public-private partnership. Aye.
Fish.
Well, this presentation brought back a flood of memories because in 2010, then Commissioner Deborah Kafori and I co-chaired the complete count. And it does seem like we've really advanced the conversation, and we have a much more sophisticated and comprehensive approach to getting a good count. I think the concern that we've all identified today is there's a lot of headwinds. It isn't just the misinformation coming out of Washington. It isn't just the climate of fear. I mean, we're asking people to fill out a form, and in some cases, these are people that still choose not to vote. These are people that do not necessarily participate in civic activities. And civic literacy generally in our community is at an all-time low. Some of these statewide surveys that we've had recently had as many as 1/2 of Oregonians surprised to learn we have 2 United States senators. I think if we present this exercise as an abstract good government exercise, we're going to lose, which is why I was very pleased to hear the tangible benefits to our community. I think for some people, they can understand that another congressional district means cloud in Washington. Other people will understand that $3,200 means a hungry child will get a meal in school or whatever. But I think our goal should be to come up with talking points that really put the human face on what the benefit is. Because if we present this as an exercise in good government or as an obligation or whatever, we're going to lose people. And the headwinds are pretty stiff. So I'm comforted by the presentation because I think we have an excellent team. And I think the plan makes a lot of sense, that obviously the time constraints are rough, and the fact that you're having difficulty getting clear answers from Washington is obviously disconcerting, but not surprising. But I want to thank our presenters for an excellent presentation. I want to thank Commissioner Udaley for the leadership that she has shown in tackling this issue. This is one of those below-the-radar issues that has huge ramifications for our community, and we all have a collective interest in getting it right. So I want to thank you. Aye.
Hardesty.
I agree. I want to also thank Director Suk. I want to thank Commissioner Udaley. And in 2000, when I worked with then Commissioner Serena Cruz to ensure that there was a full count in Multnomah County.
There you go.
See?
Got me beat.
Yeah, right. It was a community effort, right? Because the community knew what was at stake. This year, there's even more next year in 2020, there's even more at stake because we know that we have a federal government that would rather not count most of us. So the reality is that it is vital that we hire people who are deeply connected in the communities that we're attempting to reach. There's nothing like community advocates who absolutely know the community that they're serving. And I look forward to doing all I can to support this effort. Yes, I appreciate the entire council supporting this investment of dollars, but I think we have to use our voices in ways that actually encourage people to fully participate in this effort. Fear notwithstanding, I think we as the elected leadership of this city have an obligation to make sure that we talk about this everywhere we go. So I vote aye.
Wheeler.
I agree with all of the sentiment expressed by my colleagues. This was a great panel presentation. Thank you for being so organized, so provocative, and so interesting. Excellent conversation, colleagues, for a very important cause. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to reshuffle the order a bit. We're going to go to next item is 963, which is the first item on the regular agenda. We have a lot of city employees who've been sitting here very patiently. And selfishly, I want them to all get back to work as soon as possible. So we'll take 963 first, then I'm going to move the fall bump into the second place. That'll be 965, emergency ordinance, followed by 964, which is the JAG grants. So we'll start with 963, please.
Authorize the Bureau of Human Resources to establish processes and procedures necessary to support affinity group work and membership citywide.
Colleagues, diverse and empowered employees of Portland, also known as DEEP, are dedicated to enhancing a work environment that's inclusive and supportive. The work of DEEP is fostered through affinity groups. The affinity groups, of course, voluntary, employee-driven groups organized around a particular shared interest or dimension. Generally, affinity groups will be organized around protected classes such as race, disability, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation. The City of Portland supports the valuable contributions affinity groups create to honor a diverse employee culture at the City of Portland. To more formally recognize these groups and to provide the time necessary for them to achieve success, it's now also appropriate to look at establishing a more formal process to protect the time commitment that group leaders and members need to make this important contribution to our city. Here to walk us through the process and what it looks like is Interim Chief Human Resources Officer Kathy Bless. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having the opportunity to come before you today with this resolution. I am so pleased today to be able to advocate on behalf of the important work of affinity groups within the City of Portland. Having a process by which they have protected time to do this important work and participate in events and plan those events is critical to being an inclusive and diverse organization. I'll keep my comments brief because I know we're running a little behind. I want to turn it over to Debbie Castleton so she can offer some comments as well.
Thanks, Kathy.
I'm Debbie Castleton. I am the chair of the Diverse and Empowered Employees of Portland. By day, I'm on management leave this morning because this is a volunteer position, but I work for Environmental Services proudly for 17 years now. I've been the chair of DEEP as a volunteer position for 12 years now. I've been through several mayors and have received much support from Commissioner Fritz all these years. Thank you very much for all of your support, and I'm going to miss you. And happy belated birthday, Commissioner Hardesty. We have, at this time, 9 affinity groups that are very active. We have the City African American Network, the Filipino American City Employees, HAPI, which is the Hapa Asian Pacific Islanders. We have City Mamas, PDX City Mamas, the Women's Empowerment Team, the Veterans Empowerment Team, LGBTQ and Friends Affinity Group, Slavic Empowerment Team, and Latinx PDX. With these 9 affinity groups, we have over 1,000 city employees that have signed up to be included in these groups. We have over 30 leaders of these affinity groups that volunteer their time to be leading these and share that workload as volunteers. I myself, as a leader of DEEP, volunteer at least approximately, I calculated, 40 hours a week.
Wow.
Sometimes
incredible.
it's a little, like I said at the diversity conference the other day, people ask why I continue to do this. And I am a workaholic, and it is a passion of mine, and I love working at the city and the great joy it brings me to see employees so happy after being involved with an affinity group, going to an event and seeing other employees, seeing different employees come together at meetings that they haven't met each other before, and they're like, I didn't know that there was someone like me at a different bureau. And then having this come to council after 12 years, and I feel emotional right now, so I apologize if my voice cracks a little bit. There are so many field employees and remote locations, employees that have not been able to attend a meeting because they don't have the support or the time or ability to come downtown where the average meeting is at lunch. We have parks employees, we have field operators, we have so many different locations for environmental services, the Water Bureau, emergency communications, we have police officers, we have firefighters, we have so many different employees. At this time, we have an average of 5 to 20 employees that are downtown that can attend a meeting, and we have that many people putting on the monthly cultural celebrations and volunteering their time. And then people get burnt out. And this is not just about having fun or just networking. This is also about employee retention. This is about being an employer of choice. And I have people from all over the country asking my advice on how to start affinity groups and how we have such a successful program.
That's why you spend 40 hours a week volunteering.
Exactly. And I have to tell them, and a lot of people thought that DEEP was my paid job. And when I explained that, no, I actually do community relations for environmental services proudly, and that's what I do full time. And they're like, well, how do you do all this? I'm like, after hours, did you ever notice my emails come out, at lunchtime or after work, So I do have, definitely my bureau support. My Commissioner Fish has been very supportive. And Director Mike Jordan has been amazingly supportive. And my boss, Aaron Abrams, has been amazing. He says, I know you make up the time if I have to do something like this during the day. I know you make up the time. Don't worry, your workload, you make up for it. I see there's definitely an increased need for people to get together. Also, it's not, like I said, not just networking among bureaus and offices, it's finding other employees that are like yourself. It's an increased number of employees that are retiring, an increased number of employees coming in, and then accessing that knowledge from those retired employees. We have also a policy within DEEP that if you're a retired employee, you can come back to affinity group meetings because we don't want to lose that knowledge. And there's also a camaraderie. We want to keep that knowledge. Also, if you have left the city due to a layoff and you don't have another job yet, you can still come to an affinity group meeting. You may not, vote, or you just have to follow city guidelines. But that's also how you can learn of new jobs coming up, et cetera, and retain that knowledge. Most of the meetings that we have for affinity groups are, we work on events for cultural celebrations, potential policy work. A lot of it is, again, gaining knowledge from other employees and getting questions answered about city policies. And then in addition to the affinity group meetings, we also have affinity group leadership councils quarterly, and that's where all of the leaders get together with the DEEP Executive Committee, who meets once a month. And then on that quarterly meeting, we asked Cyrilda at the time, who was the HR director, if we could have an HR representative attend those meetings, and Kathy volunteered, and we were so lucky. It was before she was promoted, and then she still wanted to continue, which is awesome. And Karen Brooks, who is one of the affinity group leaders, volunteered with myself to work on this policy. So thank you. And so we worked with Kathy on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz.
And let's just be clear, we're not proposing that we're going to be paying Debbie 40 hours, an extra 40 hours a week for doing her work with the diverse empowered employees of Portland. What we have been able to do with Cyrilda Summers-McGee and with Kathy Bless's assistance is set up a code in the payroll system so that 1 hour of regularly scheduled work time monthly will be paid, which, as was referenced, the Parks employee who works at Charles Jordan would be able to take their lunch hour and make it to the meeting and back again.
Travel time,
Travel
yes.
time, yeah. So, and then employees who have established leadership have 2 hours per month, and employees with established membership can use up to 12 hours of regularly scheduled work time to host or plan special events, which actually are really open to the public and are really great community events too.
Yes,
so,
and educational.
So it's still modest, but it is something, and we really appreciate Human Resources partnership on this.
We'll be able to track some data and be able to report back to you.
Yes. We've already
Very good.
started doing that, even though it hasn't started yet, so.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions? Thank you both. Public
Thank you.
testimony, Carla?
We have one person signed up, Maggie.
All right. Thank you both. Excellent work.
Thank you.
Is Maggie here? I don't see
Maggie, are
her.
you speaking?
Okay, very good. Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Well, Debbie, before I dive into my remarks, I just want to specifically thank you and say that you've possibly done more for the morale of the city of Portland than any other individual. And you were also probably working longer hours than I am, which I'm a little concerned about. So let's talk about some self-care later. No. So the City of Portland's Diverse and Empowered Employees of Portland gave its first official annual report to City Council in 2007. And in those 12 years, it has grown into an incredible network of coworkers and colleagues focused on equity, inclusion, and connection. Not only a way to provide fellowship amongst colleagues, DEEP is also an important mechanism for professional development and advocacy. But DEEP is not just inward-facing. Many DEEP affinity groups, like the City African American Network, the HAPA Asian and Pacific Islander Affinity Group, and Latinx PDX, create public programming, often using City Hall as a venue to invite community in to connect and celebrate their communities. Their mission is simple but meaningful. DEEP is dedicated to enhancing a work environment that is inclusive and supportive of the City of Portland's diverse workforce that is committed to quality public service. In my 3 years as a Portland City Commissioner, I have seen and heard this mission fulfilled firsthand, and I want to thank all of the members of DEEP, city employees, but especially, once again, Debbie Castleton for pushing this important policy change forward. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Well, I'm very happy to co-sponsor this resolution. The Diverse Empowered Employees of Portland has been housed in the Office of Equity and Human Rights since its inception, and we're very happy with that partnership. Debbie, you've been the heart and soul of this group of affinity groups, and congratulations on your recent Robert Phillips Diversity Award. Well deserved. Thank you, Kathy Bless, and your predecessor, Cyrilda Summers-McGee, for working on this. This has been a great partnership between the Office of Equity, the Diverse Empowered Employees of Portland, and the Bureau of Human Resources, and we're happy to see all of those connections strengthened. And as was mentioned, we are striving to be an employer of choice. This is one way that it does it. For the 8 years that I was the only woman on the council, I had to form my own group of elected leaders, women, to get some support. So I'm really happy that that is no longer the case, and also glad that there are these specific groups that were mentioned. Cynthia Castro and Christina Nieves on my staff were actually involved in the formation of the Latinx PDX affinity group 5 years ago, and Cynthia continues to participate. And thank you for your work, Cynthia Castro, on getting this policy to fruition. Really happy that we all embrace this amazing program. Aye.
Fish?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how Debbie manages 40 hours on top of her day job. For those of you that don't know, she is not only the public face of the Bureau of Environmental Services on many of our capital construction projects, but Debbie pioneered a new way of connecting with the community, that is businesses and homeowners that are impacted by our work, which is we put a cover letter on top of the flyer that they get, and the cover letter is a personal note from Debbie that also has her phone number and her email address. So it's a demanding enough job as it is, but to be that accessible all the time to answer people's questions. But what we have found is that just putting that letter on the cover of a document, having a single point of contact and someone who was willing to share their contact information meant that a lot of things that used to come to us or maybe the Bureau now filter through the lead community outreach person. So when Debbie said that she's pleased that the Bureau of Environmental Services and leadership supports her work, let me just say, thank you for saying that, but we're proud to support your work. It's an honor to support your work. And if we didn't, there'd be something wrong with us. So thank you for all of your work. Commissioner Fritz, thank you for your leadership in moving this thing forward. And I love what Debbie said about being an employer of choice. Because really, when you boil it down, that is what we're talking about, making sure that everyone feels welcome and supported. And it's part of the employer of choice philosophy, which we've adopted, and we have a lot of work to do. But this is a step in the right direction, so I'm very pleased to support this. Aye.
Hardesty?
I also am very pleased to put my support behind this particular issue. It is absolutely key that employees feel welcome here, and not just welcome, but able to bring their entire selves to work. There are too many environments where people are restricted based on the perception of how other people will interpret them and their needs. And I am honored to know that the city of Portland is moving in the right direction to make sure that all employees feel that they have a place where they can be themselves 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they don't have to change to accommodate the city of Portland. But in fact, the city of Portland needs to embrace the differences that they bring. It's what makes this city vitally a place that people want to move to, which is why people are moving here on a daily basis. And so I am thrilled to be able to vote aye for this measure.
Wheeler?
Well, this is a great day. I think for City Hall, I feel like we are showing that we are a city that works, and we are a city that has made it very clear from the perspective of this council that we will be open, welcoming, and inclusive to people from wherever they are, whatever their circumstances or lived experiences or histories or traditions are. And that same set of values has to hold true for our workforce as well. I just have to call out one statistic that I thought was really interesting that Debbie and Kathy brought up, which is nearly 1,000 people, employees, participate in one of our affinity group programs. That means 1 out of every 5 or 1 out of every 6 employees at the City of Portland are actively participating in this program. And I think that goes a long way towards demonstrating the values that we all talk about. Debbie, you're amazing. I don't know you all that well. But I know what you're doing now. You're working pretty much all the time. So thank you for your leadership on a whole host of fronts. Kathy, thank you for stepping in when we really needed you and for doing such a fantastic job in your position. And to all the folks who work so hard and volunteer so hard to make sure that our affinity groups are successful here at the City of Portland so that we not only attract a great workforce, but we maintain a fantastic workplace as an employer of choice. Commissioner Fritz, I have to acknowledge your longstanding leadership on this issue. You really helped lay the foundation for us to have a strong affinity group program. And I know you know, based on the presentation we heard today, and now everybody knows, we really have one of the strongest affinity group programs of any employer here in the City of Portland and probably in the region. And you are largely to thank for that based on your work here on the council, along with the Debbies of the world and others who've worked so hard from the employee side. So thank you for that leadership. I'm very happy to vote aye. The resolution is adopted, and we look forward to the continued work. Thank you. And now, as Commissioner Fritz likes to say, now for something completely different. So we'll move to 965, please, the fall bump.
Adopt the fiscal year 2019-20 fall supplemental budget and make other budget-related changes.
Colleagues, before us, of course, we have the fall supplemental budget, also known as the fall bump. The fall bump is primarily meant to address technical adjustments to true-up budgets between fiscal years. Bureaus, of course, may also appropriate new resources or request general fund contingency for urgent and unforeseen needs that cannot be accommodated within the current budget year, and we have a number of those. City Budget Director Jessica Kennard will walk us through the current ordinance. We'll then hear in second some amendments to the ordinance. I have 2 that I believe that the council is well aware of, and after that we'll provide opportunity for public testimony before the final deliberations and voting. So now I will turn it over to Director Kennard. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning to you, Mayor and members of Council. I'm Jessica Kennard, City Budget Director, and I'm here with Jane Marie Ford, who is our Budget Monitoring Process Coordinator. You'll recall we held a work session on October 3rd where we reviewed the details of the requested supplemental budget changes. I know that Council has a very full agenda today. Given that we did just hold a detailed work session on the topic, I intend to be brief and focus my presentation on key decision points, primarily impacting the general fund. However, the entire supplemental budget ordinance is open for discussion, and I'm happy to answer questions on any aspect of the proposed bump. For the benefit of folks watching in the audience and at home, I want to briefly provide contextual information related to the budget monitoring process, or as we call it, the bump. The fall bump is the first of 3 budget monitoring processes we undertake each year. The fall bump is primarily meant to provide prior year reporting, make current year budget adjustments, and true up costs between fiscal years. Specifically in the fall bump, we true up the general fund ending balance from the prior year to account for various types of carryovers and other technical adjustments across the fiscal years. Once these adjustments are accounted for, we deposit any excess fund balance into contingency for one-time expenditures in the current year. This fall, we are recognizing a total of $11.1 million in excess general fund balance. This amount is consistent with what we would expect given city financial policies of forecasting conservatively and with a continued strong economy. Per city financial policy, half of this excess balance is dedicated to major maintenance and infrastructure costs. Thus, approximately $5.5 million are being budgeted in general fund contingency policy set-aside, which will be allocated through the capital set-aside process during the fiscal year 2021 budget development. In total, allocations in the proposed supplemental budget in front of you will yield a balance of $3.5 million in unrestricted contingency to address any unanticipated needs through the remainder of the current fiscal year or to address one-time needs in next year's budget process. So you should have in front of you Exhibit 4, which details, it's a alternatively shaded document that details requests impacting current year general fund. Again, in the interest of time, I'm only going to highlight allocations of general fund contingency that are included in the mayor's proposed supplemental budget. However, council should feel free to ask questions or interject about any of these requests. So to start off, the current mayor's proposed supplemental budget has $174,876 to fund a limited-term elections coordinator in the auditor's office following a court ruling that upheld new campaign finance regulations. It includes $392,000 to support overtime training required to implement the new integrated priority dispatch system in the Bureau of Emergency Communications. Skipping down now, it includes $1,984,400 to fund currently estimated general fund obligations related to the Portland Harbor remedy design work, including payments to the trust. It includes $250,000 in the Portland Housing Bureau to start work on procuring an expanded rental registration system. Skipping down a couple rows, it includes $6,800 in the Bureau of Human Resources for a Western States Center training for city commissioners and bureau directors in alignment with Council Resolution 37414, which condemned white supremacists and alt-right hate groups. Skipping a row, it includes $194,000 in Portland Parks and Recreation for vehicle purchases associated with operations and maintenance work that was funded, the O&M work which was funded through budget development. It includes $31,000 in Portland Parks and Recreation for Pioneer Square restroom services, $50,000 in Portland Police Bureau for safety barriers, which costs were incurred during the August 17th protest in downtown Portland. It includes $120,000 in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for additional work related to the Anti-Displacement Action Plan. It includes just over $1.2 million to fund the city's commitment pursuant to the intergovernmental agreement for the Columbia River levee system through fiscal year 2025-26. It includes $131,528 in special appropriations for Experience PDX. It includes $30,000 in special appropriations for immigration legal services at the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence, which is a one-time allocation that does not change the city's ongoing funding baseline. Includes $500,000 in special appropriations for the DePaul Treatment Center, and finally $66,000 to fund a public right-of-way cost study related to small wireless facilities in the Portland Bureau of Transportation. As stated earlier, these allocations yield a balance of approximately $3.5 million in general fund unrestricted contingency to address future urgent current year needs or one-time costs during next year's budget development. Are there any questions on any of those items? Okay. Great. Next, I'd like to turn council's attention to current appropriation level target adjustments that are included in this proposed supplemental budget. So in the fall supplemental budget, council may direct the city budget office to make adjustments to next year's current appropriation level target, which we refer to as the CAL target, and that's for the future ongoing allocated resources for bureaus. So this proposed bump includes one adjustment to CAL, which increases the CAL target by a currently estimated total of $1.8 million in the Office of Management and Finance Revenue Division for the integrated tax system. And this was also signaled through a budget note that was passed by council during the development of the current year budget. It's worth noting that this amount assumes the project is able to recover cost sharing from affected funds and entities. Finally, I'd like to highlight some position changes because we didn't have sufficient time to fully discuss those changes during the work session. You have with your Exhibit 5, there's a summary document that details all of the position changes that are included in the proposed budget. These position changes are all funded with internal bureau resources, with the exception of a limited term position in the auditor's office that's connected to the request for resources related to the new campaign finance regulations. Most notably, you'll see that the Bureau of Transportation is adding 27 FTE. 8 of these positions were previously authorized but did not get processed in time to be included in the current year budget, and the other positions seek to meet increased workload demands in maintenance, development, permitting and transit, engineering, parking, business services, and policy planning and projects. And then another, there's 4.5 FTE in parks, which are positions associated with the new operations and maintenance funding that also was approved through the 2019-20 budget development. So again, no new resources required there. Are there any other questions around the positions? So you have a copy of the full proposed supplemental budget in front of you. I'm happy to walk through any of the exhibits or answer any questions before we move to amendments and public testimony.
Commissioner Daly, did you have a question?
I guess I just want to make a statement on behalf of PBOT. I appreciate CBO's recommendation and the mayor's inclusion of $66,000 for completion of the right-of-way study. The study is related to the collection of resources from small wireless facilities. I'd also appreciate if the hammering outside would stop for the duration of council. However, PBOT also invested $186,691 to update engineering standards and pole designs to allow for the attachment of small cell equipment on our street light and signal poles. These investments were necessary to advance the citywide priority of bringing 5G capabilities to our community and resulted in $950,000 of new ongoing general fund resources. PBOT is not receiving any of these resources for the work that was completed on the city's behalf. If funding is not awarded in the fall bump to reimburse PBOT for these efforts, I'd like to put a marker down that if contingency funding is still available at the time of the spring bump, that PBOT should be reimbursed for their costs incurred in this effort. I believe the resources collected as a result of this work should pay for the work that was completed, and I hope that my colleagues will support that.
Thank you. And Commissioner Udaley, I just got a note from my office saying they are going to track down the hammering and see if they can get it suspended for the remainder of session.
Thank you. $6 at work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I also want to compliment the budget office, Jessica, Director Jessica. You do a fabulous job of both making this understandable, right, and being collaborative with our officers. And I just want to publicly say what a difference a year makes. I feel so much more knowledgeable now about the budget, and it's because of your office ability to just go through and discuss anything that needs to be discussed. I also want to appreciate the forward thinking that allows us to put almost $2 million into a trust for the Portland Harbor cleanup, because we will have an obligation to do that. And though it's distasteful to think that we are spending city money to make that happen, we know it must happen, right? And we're still hopeful that we will get the polluters to pay their own way, but we have an obligation to make sure that our community is not inhaling those toxics. And the last kind thing I'll say about you today, Jessica, but maybe there'll be more, but at least for the moment, is that I am also grateful. There was one other one that I wanted to really highlight. And it was another appropriation. Do you remember what it was? It's something that we have to do, but we didn't have to do it now.
The Columbia River levy.
The Columbia River, yes. How could I forget the Columbia River? Again, I think that we are making really smart decisions because we're thinking about what's going to be coming down the road that we are responsible for, and you are helping us quite a bit. You and your staff have just been phenomenal in helping us understand that. So thank you. That was my question.
So we're going to move to amendments now?
Yes.
All right, very good. I'd like to propose two. I make a motion for the following adjustment to the supplemental budget as proposed. Increase general fund contingency policy set aside by $250,000 to be available for outside legal counsel for labor negotiations. And we would reduce general fund unrestricted contingency by $250,000 to fund this change. We'd update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change. Can I get a second? We have a motion for myself, a second from Commissioner Hardesty. That is now on the table. We'll keep it open pending public testimony. The second motion I'd like to make as an adjustment to the supplemental budget is proposed as follows. Increase general fund bureau program expenses by $25,000 in the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and $25,000 in the Bureau of Development Services for partnering to mitigate fossil fuel risk. Reduce general fund unrestricted contingency by $50,000 to fund this change, and then again, update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change.
Second.
Motion and a second, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Fritz, I understand you have an amendment?
Thank you. I move to increase general fund bureau program expenses for the Office of Equity and Human Rights by $25,000 to fund unanticipated personnel costs in the current year. Reduce general fund contingency by $25,000 to fund this change, and update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Udaley, and then Commissioner Fish.
Yes, I have so did you say earlier that someone in your office is going to ask them to cease?
Yes.
So are we having a protracted negotiation over that, or can we just ask someone to stop? Can we have someone follow up on that? Because it really, I can't hear my colleagues. I think we only just need to tell the person to stop.
Here, take this with you.
Where's Keenan know when we need him?
We got law enforcement in here. Maybe they can go out and just look at it.
We got a big building. They can move to another part just for an hour or so. So,
Kirsten Dennis is on it. Thank you, Kirsten.
So my amendment is to increase Bureau program expenses for Portland Parks and Recreation by $31,344 in the Gulf Fund, which is Fund 603, and $27,656 in the Portland International Raceway Fund, Fund 604. Those are both enterprise funds, for a net increase of $59,000 in Bureau Enterprise Fund resources to fund an operating shortfall in the Peninsula 1, Penn 1 Drainage District. This would reduce contingency in Fund 603 and Fund 604 by $31,344 and $27,656 respectively to fund this change. Update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed to reflect this change. This amendment provides one-time funding for Peninsula 1 expenses attributed to the 640 acres of drainage district that fall within the boundaries of the Portland International Raceway and the Heron Lakes Golf Course. Update exhibits 1 through 5 as needed.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Any further amendments?
I believe we can now call the roll on the
Are
amendments.
we ready to go? Well, I'd like to go to public testimony before
I'm
we call
sorry.
the roll
Yes,
on the
public
amendments.
testimony.
Comes out. We're eating.
Have you completed your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is there any public testimony on the amendments, Carla? Or
Yes,
the
we have
main
6
motion?
people signed up.
Very good.
The first 3, please come on up, are Karen Kushner, Koi Vu, and Adam McBride Smith.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the time today, Mr. Mayor and commissioners and members of the City Council. I'm a board member for Metropolitan Family Services, and I'm here delighted to explain to you why I feel like we need to review the deficit that's currently in the budget. So again, thank you for your time. As you know, PDX Experience Score is a very strong intergenerational program. It's showing very strong results. And in one site alone, 93% of the children met or exceeded fluency. There are 75% of the
Ma'am,
children.
Could you suspend for 1 second?
Yes.
We have about 2 inches of paperwork in front of us. So can I just make a suggestion, and this won't be used
Yes.
against your time? Could you each begin by saying whether you are here to support an existing budget ask or whether you're seeking an amendment? Because it would be helpful to us to understand, are we talking something that's in the mayor's proposed or an amendment? And then give us your best argument. But it would just be helpful to frame this up in terms of what are we talking about?
Yeah, and this can also get a little complicated because it was not in the Bureau proposed, but it is in the mayor's proposed for experienced PDX, 131.
Amy, did you want to speak to that?
So, well,
Could you identify yourself, please?
So it's in the mayor's proposed, and I just want to be clear. Are you here to support something that's in the mayor's proposed?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and All right, thank you. That's very helpful.
Could you give us your name, please?
Yes, my name is Karen Kushner, and I'm a board member. And this is a wonderful program. It is currently serving 5 schools. We have 1,450 students that are in the classrooms, and we have 108 students that have a one-on-one relationship. We have ongoing partnership with SEI, NEA, Latina Network, and ERCO so that we can recruit mentors and we can introduce these children to immigrants and refugee elders. The current program is serving 75% of children who are children of color. And as a board member, I want you to ask your support for this program. We have a lot of mentors in the room currently, a lot of staff, the ED, and the program manager. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. You started your presentation by saying there was a shortfall, and that's why this is in the mayor's proposed budget. I'd like
Yes,
to hear
Commissioner
more.
Hardesty. So we are actually running at a deficit. We currently have 1.5 full-time employee as opposed to the 2.5 full-time employee it takes to run the program.
And so my question is, what are you going to do to make sure you're not coming back to the city next time because you have a budget shortfall? Is this just a temporary thing, or are you expecting this to be ongoing funding?
I believe it was an accidental issue that happened in the budgeting. That's my understanding of it. I think that something happened when we proposed the original budget that covered the 2.5, and I think there was a mishap.
I think there's someone back there that wants to come up forward and explain that. And I just want to say it has nothing to do with whether I like or dislike the program. It's just as a elected official who has a city budget that we have to balance. I just want to understand why we're doing this and to make sure that it is a real emergency and it's not something that becomes ongoing.
No, okay. My name's Judy Strand. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Metropolitan Family Service. And Experience PDX was a project that started in partnership with the city for the last budget cycle. And so that was an allocation that we all had invested in together. And we had proposed for that investment to be renewed as we had understood we should. That got overlooked by the city inadvertently, and so we were asked to come back to apply for the fall bump because our proposal did not get noticed, and it was just an oversight. So that we are just here to speak to the fact that the program needs are still present. We had to cut because we didn't have the ongoing funds that we anticipated. Does that make sense?
It does.
Perhaps Mayor Wheeler, you could...
Perhaps a offline conversation would actually illuminate the questions that I have. Again, nothing away from the quality of the program, but I'm always concerned when someone says, oh, there was a shortfall, so here we are.
I want to be,
excuse me,
wait,
but it is
can
not-
I just be
yes.
really clear? Because
Yeah.
we're in the fall bump process
Yeah.
right now. So there's no commitment at this point for ongoing. And this
Right.
is a conversation where we need to have a more thoughtful conversation in the upcoming full
Sure,
budget process.
yes.
Yeah,
That
because
sounds
my understanding
great.
was it was a pilot project. It was not authorized as an ongoing allocation.
Yes, and at the same time, we were encouraged to apply again for this time period. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, the challenge is we didn't have any extra money this year, so I'm supportive of the mayor's proposal to fund it for this year, but we may not have any extra money next year, so
I
just want you to be
understand.
aware
I
of
think
that.
we have some other ideas
So
about
it's not a
funding.
yes or a no.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying the conversation about
Yeah.
ongoing will continue
Right.
into the regular budget process.
I was going to say, and we encourage a lot of people to apply, but we don't have all the money we'd like to have to actually fund all the things that people apply for. So thank you very much. That's been very helpful for
Okay,
this
thank you.
conversation.
I appreciate your being here as always. Thank you.
Hi, if you don't mind, I'd like to go next. just
Sure.
Because we are talking about the same
Yeah, please, go
program
ahead.
here, and
Go for it.
I can't tell if the microphone is on or not.
It's off, hold on.
Do I need to push one? Okay, there you go. Hi
There you go. Good.
Perfect. So hi, I'm Koi Vu. I'm the Director of Asian Family Center with the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization. I'm also here in support of Metropolitan Family Services to talk about the fall bump in regards to the mentoring program that we partner with MFS with. So for those of us who don't know, and I will be brief, IRCO is a culturally specific nonprofit organization in the Portland area that provides direct holistic wraparound social services, education, legal services, advocacy to immigrants and refugees, and our larger community in Oregon, primarily in the Portland Tri-County area, but also we have a presence in Ontario to serve our African, Syrian, and Iraqi refugees over there in Ontario. We serve a multi-ethnic intergenerational population from prenatal through our parent-child development services to end of life in our senior services programs. I've been here to testify before, wearing different hats. The last time I was here was with my aging colleagues, well, I guess we're all aging, but our aging services colleagues. Aging and services colleagues and peers from Metro Family Services. We highlighted the importance, I highlighted the importance of oral history and storytelling in ethnic communities because that is the way that our ancestors have been doing it from the beginning of time. And through these mentorship programs that MFS and IRCO has been partnering with together, we are able to do this with our communities. Truth is that many of our newly arrival immigrants and refugees are still trying to survive, learn, and integrate in a new world and way of life. However, as they live here longer, they realize that we're no longer going back to our own countries, and that we have to integrate into this new system, and oftentimes it's very isolating in a very individualistic country that we are a part of. And so many retirees and adults actually do want to give back and lift back their communities and don't know how, other than the larger community engagement, civic engagement, but at an individualistic level or at a more interpersonal level, sometimes it's not as available. And so they want to build the relationships to preserve their cultures and languages for the next generation. So that's why we were so excited to be partnering with MFS and to partner with the Experience Corps PDX a few years ago to support the intergenerational mentoring program and using an equity lens for culturally responsive programming and matching of mentors and mentees. At the beginning of the work, earlier iteration, IRCO, along with other culturally specific organizations, NAYA, Latino Network, SEI, including IRCO, provided coaching and training to MFS staff and leadership on working with diverse communities, specifically at IRCO, the immigrant and refugee communities. And then now we are working very closely together to identify culturally specific mentors to work with the students.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So we're here to continue to support the work that MFS is doing, and we ask for your assistance in supporting that work.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. My name is Adam McBride-Smith. I'm here speaking for Real Choice Initiative, and I'd like to speak in favor of the expanded rental registry and to ask also that it be fully funded at the requested amount. This registry would include basic accessibility features and price ranges so that renters can actually use the registry to find housing that works best for them. This is a pressing need for renters with disabilities, older renters, and low-income renters, people of color, and many others. Right now, in this city, it's nearly impossible to find accessible, affordable housing, but an inclusive rental registry could change that for the better. The disability community needs this to keep us out of medical facilities, institutions, and off the streets, because that's where people with disabilities end up when they can't find appropriate housing. I appreciate that the fall supplemental budget funds a percentage of the cost of an expanded rental registry, but we'd like to urge you to please provide the needed funding to get the expanded rental registry done as soon as possible. I'd also like to say on a personal note, my wife was diagnosed with MS several years ago, and I can say that keeping health insurance and maintaining care are burden enough. We're lucky to have stable housing, but many people in our community with MS, with other conditions, who use power chairs, who have mobility issues, who have low vision and other disabilities, struggle to find appropriate housing. Having an expanded rental registry which includes information related to accessibility and price ranges is vitally important for this community. And if you are sincere about ending houselessness in this city, if you want to be leaders in disability rights, as you should want to be, we would urge you to support the expanded rental registry.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
And could I just briefly comment on that? So I want you to know that it has my 100% commitment, and what I have requested in the mayor's supplemental is what I believe we can actually deploy between now and the end of the year, given what I've heard from the Bureau of Housing. So we are moving forward. Next year's full budget will include more funding for the additional resources, both for the product that we're going to need as well as the personnel and the systems to go to the unit-by-unit data collection, which I think is where we all want to ultimately get. So we're not being stingy here. If I felt realistically that by the end of the fiscal year we could do it, I'd put the whole amount in today. But it's just been made very clear to me and my colleagues that the resources that we have included in the supplemental budget is what they can realistically deploy by the end of the fiscal year. But I personally have an ongoing commitment beyond that into the next budget cycle as well, and I just wanted you to know that.
Okay, I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you for speaking to
Yeah,
that.
thank you for your testimony. Thank you both.
Thank you.
The last three who signed up are Laura Heller, Alan Hines, and Nico Serra.
Welcome. Good morning for one more minute.
One more minute.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, good morning, almost good afternoon. My name is Laura Heller. I'm the program manager of older adult and intergenerational programming at Metropolitan Family Service.
So can I just tell you something that's very encouraging? There's no one in this council that has indicated they're going to take this out of the mayor's proposed.
Okay.
So we welcome testimony, but no one has signaled this is coming out. So it looks like you've got 5 votes, and anything you want to share with us just to reinforce would be welcome, but I think you've won the day.
Well, thank you. Out of respect for your time, I'll return my time to you then. Thank you.
I'd like to hear something of what you have to
Okay,
say. I mean,
all
you
right,
came all
thank
this
you.
way.
Yeah, no, we're helping.
Thank you.
I was
Okay.
trying to reassure you. I wasn't trying to cut you off.
Thank you. I'm trying to read things. I wanted to share a story, but first I wanted to acknowledge we have several of our volunteers in the room who've taken time out of their service today to be here because they recognize how important it is.
Wave so we know
All
who
right.
you are.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
See, we'd have missed that if you'd have just left.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm already tearing up because I'm going to share a story with you that Carol, one of our volunteers here, shared with me at a team meeting. We have monthly team meetings at our schools, and Carol's story, I think, really articulates the power of an intergenerational connection between an older adult who really is there to support a child in both their learning, their academic success, but also in their development and their growth, and also there to hear when things aren't going well. So the following story provides a compelling illustration of the impact of the training that we offer, support, and growth provided by ECPDX for students, mentors, and schools. Carol met in early May with one of her third grade student matches, Enrique. Enrique had recently returned to Portland from Guatemala, his home country, but Carol learned that his father had been deported and was unable to return to Portland with his family. In their meeting, Carol observed that Enrique was not able to focus enough to read together, so they talked. The student told Carol that his family did not have a lot of, quote, stuff in the house. His mother was looking for work, but they were hungry most of the time and, quote, running out of money fast. Enrique showed Carol stitches where he had fallen and hit his head while they were in Guatemala. He did not know if he was checked for a concussion, and he said that he'd been having headaches frequently since he fell. Carol shared this information with the student's teacher and the school nurse. The teacher immediately emailed the Sun site manager, the after-school manager, programming manager, and school social worker. By the end of the day, the Sun site manager had spoken with Enrique's mother, helped schedule a medical appointment for Enrique, and provided the family with a food box.
Additionally, a school employee had scheduled to meet with Enrique's mother to purchase additional food and hygiene items, and the family was provided with vouchers to purchase shoes, information regarding the district clothing closet, and other resources. Lastly, the family was approved through Self-Enhancement Incorporated to pay an overdue electricity bill. By listening and leading with the relationship, this mentor was able to activate a community of support around the student, steps she had not felt empowered to take previously. Carol attributed this outcome in part to the additional training and knowledge she had received through ERCO, our partner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, I am the Director of Real Choice Initiative. I serve on the Rental Services Commission. I had several conversations with all the officers about the importance of accessible affordable housing. So I'll keep this brief. As a disability community, we really need to know where the accessible units are in the city. It's very difficult for us to obtain that information at all. It's like, and haystack to find accessible housing for community. So I appreciate that you have allocated $250,000 for the Senate registry. I encourage you to do everything in your power to make sure the registry is fully funded so that our community can find housing when we need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in response to the prior gentleman, I said that this is a commitment, and I believe it's a commitment on the part of the entire council to make sure that we get that registry at a unit-by-unit data basis. So in particular, that people with disabilities know where the units are and can be connected to those units. It's really important, and I appreciate the fact that you've testified in front of this council many times to make that case. Thank you again for doing it. Thank you. Commissioner Daly.
Thanks for being here again, Alan. And I just want to personally attest to the challenges of finding accessible housing. My son is 18 now. I am moving out. He is staying in the accessible rental property that we have. I can afford almost any rent in the city, and I'm struggling to find a place that he could visit, let alone live. So this isn't just an issue for low-income renters or people living on restricted incomes. This is an issue that is affecting all families, and it's very expensive to convert or adapt houses to be accessible. And when you're a renter, you don't necessarily have full ability to do that at all. So I want to thank you for your support, but I do just want to kind of underscore the urgency of being able to match people who need accessible housing with the very limited accessible housing that is available.
Thanks, Alan. Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Nico Sara. I am a white-passing, mixed-race, queer, and transgender person with disabilities, and I am here to speak in favor of the expanded rental registry. Reiterate with what my colleagues have said, just that the inclusive rental registry will make life so much easier for so many people. It's really something that we need, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Fairview Okay, yeah, so Fairview was a place where basically instead of making the world accessible, people with disabilities that were using wheelchairs and had other very severe disabilities were just sent off to a place. The place was Fairview. It was near Salem, and it was a really difficult place. It was a large institution where people were kept basically because the world's not wheelchair accessible. So we've moved from that model into more like smaller houses, group homes and things like that, 24-hour residential facilities. But people who are in these places really, they want to get out of those places too. And we have, between having care workers through our DHS and our Social Security, where we really could have more independence than a lot of us do, just because we can't find the housing we need. So just really want to reiterate that we want you to fund this, and you know, if we come in and say you're probably going to be the ones telling us that we need more funding for the software, please do everything you can to make this happen. And also, please include us when you start asking about the accessibility features, because we can really help make that process easier about, you know, our basics. Are there stairs? Can we get in and out of the bathroom? Stuff like that, so that we can just make this process be as smooth as possible.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Thank you, all three of you. Appreciate it. Carla, were there more?
That's all who signed up.
All right, very good. So why don't we go through the amendments in the order that they were presented? First, with regard to the, my first amendment with regard to the $250,000 set aside for legal counsel for labor negotiations, could you, did you have more testimony?
Oh, no,
Okay.
just in case there were questions for us.
Were there any other questions before I call the roll on the amendments? Very good. So please call the roll on the mayor's amendment 1.
Udaly?
Mayor, I want to thank you for funding this request. I think it's vitally important, and I vote aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the amendment's on the table. Mayor, Amendment 2, which was the $50,000 for the Bureau of Development Services for partnering to mitigate fossil fuel risk. Any further questions? Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, amendment's on the table. Commissioner Fritz, number 1, with regard to the Office of Equity and Human Rights, $25,000. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
I appreciate my colleagues' support. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz, for bringing this to our attention. In my conversation with the mayor, I suspect that there will be more of these, and I look forward to supporting those as well. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Wheeler?
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. I vote aye. The amendment is on the table, and that gets us to...
We have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fish. Commissioner Fish's amendment, and that was a series of increase to program expenses in Parks and Recreation, the Golf Fund, PIR, and Penn One.
And Mayor, just to be clear, this does not involve the general fund.
Correct.
This is 2 enterprise funds setting aside some resources for Penn One.
You got it. Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Thank you for that clarification, and Commissioner Fish, I vote aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Yes, I also appreciate the clarification, and I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Amendments on the table. To the main motion, to the supplemental budget as amended, any further discussion? Anything else from the budget office? Please call the roll.
Udaly?
Well, thank you, everyone who came here to testify today. Who knew that fall bump could be such an emotional item, but between the story shared about the Sun School, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the program, but Experience PDX story and Fairview, I feel like we're doing some really important work in a relatively boring seeming moment. I vote aye.
Fritz?
I appreciate that this budget adjustment includes something that is important to each member of the council. That's partly what we do in the budget process, is making sure that we listen to each other and work together to be wise stewards of the taxpayers' money. Aye.
Fish?
Just a couple of comments. First, Because Ted Wheeler is the mayor, he generally gets blamed for everything that doesn't work in our community, including, he's very gracious, he takes the flack for a lot of us with our deficiencies. So let's acknowledge that the mayor, under our charter, which grants the mayor very few powers, has 3 unique powers. And one is the mayor is supposed to lead the budget process. So if the budget process is a smooth ride, if it is collaborative, if we're able to reach a soft landing based on consensus and conversations as we are today, I think the mayor deserves the credit. Lord knows he gets enough blame for other things. So first of all, thank you, Mayor. I've been involved now in, I think, 40 different budget modification processes. There have been some fireworks at some. There have been some sticking points. There have been issues that really provoked a lot of passion. This is a relatively soft landing, and you've brought the council together around what I think is a prudent set of choices, so I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Director Kennard, who is now in her which month of full-time employment?
Permanent.
She's in her 3rd month of being the permanent director, is doing a terrific job. I want to echo what Commissioner Hardesty said. She is very accessible, and she spends a lot of time with commissioners in their office explaining things and getting feedback, and I think she's doing a great job. So thank you, Director Kennard, to you and your staff. There are a number of things that I really deeply care about in this bump. I'm pleased that the money set aside for the Portland Harbor Trust was identified. By the way, the trust idea is so great that the polluter's favorite lawyer in town is suing us over its implementation. But that's par for the course in government. But I'm pleased that we're setting money aside. I'm actually very pleased that we're making real progress on the cleanup, but pleased that the council is showing this foresight to put the money aside. On behalf of the Rangers and my bureau, Parks Bureau, thank you for funding some additional vehicles that will allow them to actually get around the city as they are required to. And while we haven't really talked about it much, I'm pleased the mayor has brought forth an ask for the DePaul Treatment Center. One thing we know about the current crisis on our streets is that a lot of people are suffering from addiction. The worst place in the world to treat addiction is on our sidewalks. We need more beds. We have some very dubious statistics in the state of Oregon in terms of the level of services we provide to people who have addiction. We have an opioid crisis and other things that are exacerbating the situation. So DePaul does a terrific job and gets great outcomes, also serves a lot of very vulnerable low-income people and helps them deal with their addiction. So Mayor, I'm pleased as part of our overall response to this homeless crisis that we're investing in the new DePaul Treatment Center, which will be located in Gateway. Thank you to my colleagues for the conversations we've had. I'm very pleased to vote aye.
Hardesty.
I also am very grateful that this bump process has been a very inclusive process. It's been one where we've had hard conversations and had to, of course, make some hard choices because we don't have all the money we would like to have to do all the things we would like to do. I am very grateful and appreciative that the mayor has taken a very collaborative approach and actually has had really deep conversations. I actually feel like the city council is in a place that I wished we were long before I got here, which is that I think, respect that each other comes from a different worldview. We've had different life experiences, but at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, which is to serve the people of the city of Portland to the best of our ability. And so I am honored to put my support behind this budget, this bump process, and I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues and the bureaus for their commitment to fiscal responsibility throughout this fall bump process. I want to second the thanks for Director Kennard and her entire team. They've done an outstanding job. And I want to thank my team, especially Kristen Dennis, who's worked very hard on this process. There's a few items I'm particularly pleased about that I just want to quickly highlight. First of all, the $120,000 for a joint effort between city bureaus and community organizations in the advancement of our anti-displacement action plan. And as we all know, community organizations have a proven track record when it comes to researching anti-displacement policies to the city's benefit. And there's some really good coalition work already underway through the city's comprehensive plan, the Southwest Corridor's Equitable Development Strategy, and the East Portland Action Plan. And it's my belief that we must support these city and community partnerships on displacement so that Portland gets it right. If we create an anti-displacement action plan with insight both from the bureaus and those who are the most impacted, we can obviously create better and more durable solutions. And we can become that city we want to become, where people don't fear investments and services as precursors for displacement. The $500,000 that Commissioner Fish just mentioned for the DePaul Treatment Center, we know that the addiction crisis here is a serious one. Some recent statistics that I've heard include that Oregon is the fourth most addicted state in the United States, and depending upon whose statistics you believe, we are either the 47th or the 49th in terms of providing treatment services. And so that does help explain some of what we see in terms of the crisis that's been unfolding on our streets. So with this investment and investments from many other supporters, DePaul will be providing new space and new services to provide critical treatment to those who are in need in our community. The $50,000 for joint funding between BDS and the Portland Bureau of Development Services and the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management for a PSU study on mitigating fossil fuel risk. I'm proud to be working with Commissioner Hardesty on this. I'm so proud of the fact that the entire City Council is behind this, and we're glad to seek a foundational piece to the city's strategy to transition to a clean, secure, and safe energy future. We can't wait on action around climate change. We have to make the necessary investments to make the transition. And I want to thank the many Portlanders and environmental organizations and neighborhood coalition offices who contacted my office and supported these efforts. And finally, this is the smallest item that made it into the fall supplemental budget, but it's not an insignificant one. It was $6,800 for a city employee training pilot in partnership with the Western States Center. In February, the City Council unanimously passed a resolution condemning white supremacy and alt-right hate groups. That resolution directed the city to develop training for city employees about the history of white supremacy and white nationalism in the Portland area. The funding is for the development of a pilot training that will be first offered to city commissioners and bureau directors and then expand from there. And I look forward to being part of the first group to receive this training under this particular grant. Just a couple of quick footnotes here. During the budget process, as Commissioner Hardesty mentioned, we had significantly more demand for general fund dollars than we actually had in terms of resources to support those requests. So I'm pleased to announce that we've landed on a strategy to support both the Division Transit and the James Beard Market study from existing funds. I directed Prosper Portland to allocate general fund dollars to support small business outreach as part of the Division Transit project, and through its partnership with OMSI in the Central East Side, they'll work to fund the James Beard Market pre-development work through the Central East Side TIF investment, the tax increment financing. And I've asked that they bring back to us by 2020 a report on whether there is or is not a feasible path forward for the James Beard Market. So with that, I vote aye. Fall supplemental budget ordinance is adopted as amended.
And the crowd goes wild.
And now for something completely different. Item number 964 is up next.
Authorize a $391,694 U.S. Department of Justice Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Community Grant Agreement and appropriate $300,000 in law enforcement and criminal justice funds for fiscal year 2019-20.
So, colleagues, in the interest of time, I'm going to forego my lengthy introduction. I think we're all very familiar with this proposal, and I apologize that I have to leave at about 1:15. So I won't speak, and I'll just turn it over to our able Bureau folks to answer any questions that we may have on this.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Bob Delgazzi, Business Operations Manager with Portland Police Bureau. Here with a short presentation on the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. This is for the program fiscal year 2018 application. On August 22nd of 2018, the city submitted an application to the United States Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance for the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant fiscal year 2018 local solicitation. The 2018 solicitation still requires a minimum 30-day review by the governing body of the unit of local government, although the Office of Justice Programs decreased the application window from 6 to 4 weeks this year. Upon advice from the city attorney, the Bureau is proceeding with the application ordinance to fulfill the review requirement. The grant program instituted by the Department of Justice in 2005 is named after Edward R. Byrne, a New York City Police Department officer who was killed in the line of duty in 1988. The Department of Justice directs funding to the local enforcement agencies to assist in their efforts to prevent or reduce crime and violence. The 2018 JAG funds will be made under the disparate certification to the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and the City of Gresham. The solicitation requires the city to submit a joint application for the disparate municipalities and to act as the fiscal agent for the grant. The formula award amount is allocated to the three entities based on a statutory formula provided by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Police Bureau will receive $189,585, Multnomah County $148,960, and Gresham Police Department $53,149, for a total of $391,694 in federal funding. Although the federal grant award period is 4 years per federal statute, local agencies spend their awards within 2 years. Police Bureau will utilize JAG funding for the following item. It's to support the first of the 3-year bicycle registration program designated for the Bureau's Bicycle Theft Task Force. This is modeled after the successful Vancouver, British Columbia program. Grant funding will provide for personnel and event expenses for participation in bicycle events to encourage on-the-spot registration and registration kits for low-income community members. Bike thieves target about 10,000 bicycles each year in Portland, and this equates to about $10 million worth of property loss for the community. If a bicycle is not registered, there's less than a 10% chance that it will be returned to its owner. Multnomah County will fund a portion of the personnel expenses for the North Neighborhood Deputy District Attorney position, and the Gresham Police Department is asking for grant funds for their education program called Every 15 Minutes, which is designed to dramatically instill teenagers with the potentially dangerous consequences of drinking alcohol and texting while driving, which are referred to as distracted and impaired driving behaviors. The Department of Justice states that the 2018 grant will be awarded after September 30th of 2018.
So, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you because when we met, you talked about the fact that you would not have taken the grant had you been required to do some of the things that they wanted done around us being a sanctuary city. I think that is huge. I think that's important, and that's why I want to put that on the record. We'll see how successful the bike project is. It sounds like a good project. I'm glad that it's being funded by this grant. But I just wanted to put on the record that I think it's a great thing that we can draw a line in the sand, and all money, as I've said before, isn't good money. And so I'm glad that it was cleaned up before we got it. So thank you very much. Appreciate that work.
Very good. Any further questions?
Yeah, just
Commissioner Fish, sorry.
A similar but slightly different twist on that observation. After we declared that we were a sanctuary city, the Trump administration said that there would be steps taken to retaliate and punish cities that did that. And one of the things that they highlighted was withholding any kind of discretionary or formula money through law enforcement. This city joined a lawsuit challenging that. The courts rejected it, looking at both the 10th Amendment and other parts of the Constitution. I want to acknowledge that our system of checks and balances works, that it is well established under federal law that you cannot coerce a jurisdiction to do something and use funding as the threat. And the Trump administration lost that in the courts. And today we're getting a grant that was in jeopardy in response to our designation. So I want to just acknowledge the fact that we do have a functioning Constitution, and B, a set of checks and balances where we can test these theories. And this idea that funds could be withheld, which was when Jeff Sessions was the head of the Justice Department, he and Trump made that proposal, has been rejected, and we are getting the funds. So I think that's a good day for people who believe in checks and balances. So thank you.
That's a good point. Any further questions? Any public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one else signed up.
Very good. Call the roll.
Udaley?
Well, I'd just like to share the 529 Shield information. It takes 5 minutes to register your bike through the 529 Garage app. It's available on iTunes or Google Play Store, and if you don't have a smartphone, you can go to project529.com. I plan on doing this today. I don't think I've ever registered my bike, and I've had multiple bikes stolen, so thank you, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for getting this. Thank you to our city attorneys for working on making sure that the federal government did what they're supposed to do. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Good work. Thank you. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, I'm going to move the last two around 967, please, the Housing Bureau, and I think we can get through this one relatively quickly.
967, amend subrecipient contracts with Community Energy Project by $290,000.
Not a problem.
And Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, Inc. by $70,000 to support home repair services.
All right, colleagues, good morning. Again, actually, it's good afternoon. The Portland Housing Bureau's Neighborhood Housing Prevention Team works to stabilize communities at risk of displacement through a variety of homeownership retention actions. Emergency home repair funds are critical to help low-income homeowners stay in their homes. This year, the Portland Housing Bureau issued a competitive request for proposals in both the Lentz Urban Renewal Area and the Interstate Urban Renewal Area for home repair grant services. Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives was selected to provide these grants in the Interstate URA, and the Community Energy Project was selected for both the Lentz URA and the Interstate URA. This action allows us to add these funds through existing contracts. These are culturally responsive service providers who provide to Portland's low-income homeowners, helping to prevent displacement, stabilize neighborhoods, and preserve intergenerational wealth. I want to thank the community members that donated their time to reviewing these applications and the great insights that they provided. I'll now turn it over to the Portland Housing Bureau staff, Dana Ingram and Emma Deppa, to talk in more detail about the programs. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor. Again, my name is Dana Ingram Shepherd, and I'm the Neighborhood Housing Manager at the Housing Bureau.
And I'm Emma Depp. I'm a housing program coordinator at the
Could you
Housing
move the
Bureau.
mic up?
It moves.
All right, did you guys catch that? All right, I'll go ahead and move forward then. All right, home repair grants. The Housing Bureau has the Home Repair Grant Program to stabilize communities at risk of displacement through our home retention efforts. And we do target households at or below the 50% area median income, which is $43,950 for a family of 4. And it prioritizes seniors and people with disabilities. I do want to just add here that of the folks that have received home repair services through the funding from the Housing Bureau, over half of them represent communities of color. And on top of that, over 85% have reported as being households over the age of 55.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Quick question, the $43,950, is that 60% of the area median income?
That is 50% of the area
It's
median.
50%?
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. So we did submit a request for proposals for a total of $360,000 $200,000 in Lents, and the Lents URA, by the way, and $160,000 in interstate URA. And the requirements of that application was it had to be a nonprofit organization, experienced serving low-income homeowners, culturally responsive, and have the ability to perform outreach in the targeted areas. I also want to just add that the interstate TIF funds are a direct advocacy and initiative from the North-Northeast Neighborhood Strategy. So, the funding awards. So Lents, the $200,000 awarded to Community Energy Project. This will be added to an existing contract that that organization has with the Bureau through the master ordinance passed earlier this year. And the interstate funds, $70,000 awarded to Portland Community Reinvestment Initiatives, also known as PCRI. An additional $90,000 awarded to Community Energy Project, CEP.
Can I just ask a question off? $70,000 seems like a fairly modest amount of money. And you have to administer the program, so there's staff costs, overhead costs. What are we buying for $70,000 with PCRI?
We are buying 7 additional households to be served, so with these funds. However, I do want to just add that PCRI does already provide these services, home repair services, so they're already serving this community. And because of the time frame allowed, they did not fully apply for all of the funds, so about 7 households.
So they
That
have the
answers your
existing
questions.
infrastructure. We're not funding that. We're getting, these are dollars that'll be going out the door.
These are not 100% going out the door. There is a certain amount of administrative cost. There is a partnership with this particular proposal, and it actually is with NAMAC. Help me out with that acronym.
The National Association of Minority Contractors.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So the amendments to add RFP funding awards to the existing contracts will provide critical repairs to 49 additional households.
Good.
That's it. You have questions?
Very good presentation. Thank you for your hard work. Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one else signed up.
All right, very good. Then we'll call the roll.
Udaley?
Thank you. Aye.
Fritz?
Great work. Aye, thank you.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Wheeler?
Very happy to support this. Thank you for your work. Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Last but not
Thank you
least,
all.
966, and this is a first reading.
Authorize $30 million of revenue bonds for North Macadam Urban Renewal Area.
Colleagues, this proposed ordinance authorizes the issuance of up to $30 million in revenue bonds to finance infrastructure and economic development projects within the North Macadam urban renewal area. The financing authorization will allow Prosper Portland to execute projects under the North Macadam urban renewal area plan as opportunities avail themselves. And we have staff here who can address this. Hello. You're not the staff on my list. That's why I'm just skipping to the bottom. Oh, well, you know what? Here I do. I have a stickum. Stand by. Update. Matt Garage is here. Hello.
Yeah, Matt Gierach.
Gierach. Thanks,
Gierach,
Matt. How are
yeah.
you doing today?
Thanks. Debt manager. Wasn't anticipating being able to join, but I was able to join last minute. And I'm accompanied by
Tony Barnes, Finance Manager at Prosper Portland.
Hey, Tony. It's good to see you.
So, just to summarize the authorization, the proposed revenue bonds will initially be structured as one or more lines of credit, which will be refinanced with long-term tax increment revenue bonds at a later date or potentially repaid by future tax increment revenues. The initial line of credit will be secured by tax increment revenues of the North Macadam urban renewal area. However, the city's full faith and credit may be offered as security on the interim financing of the infrastructure projects in order to decrease interest costs. Projects within the North Macadam urban renewal area will focus on economic development consistent with the urban renewal area plan.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What basis do you say issuing the bonds will decrease interest costs? What is that based on?
Well, issuing the line of credit initially will decrease interest costs rather than issuing the long-term bonds initially. So with the line of credit, we're able to draw down the principal amount over time. So the interest calculation is essentially going to be on a smaller basis for what you're paying interest on, versus with the bonds, you're essentially borrowing all the money up front, and those monies will be reinvested in our investment fund. So typically, short-term rates that we invest at are lower than what the borrowing rate is, which are long-term rates. So typically, it makes sense for when you have project uncertainty to use a line of credit.
So I appreciate you attempting to answer my questions before this hearing. I'm still not clear as to why we would allow the $30 million line of credit when you don't have projects specifically that you have identified.
Oh, I see.
that funding will be used for.
I see.
So I still haven't been able to connect those dots based
Okay.
on the information that you've provided.
Okay, so the debt will not actually exist until we draw it, and we won't be able to draw on the line of credit until those projects are actually approved within the budget process.
And does that limit our ability to do bonding in other areas of the city of Portland if you have tied up the $30 million for projects that you don't know yet what they look like? I mean, so if I wanted to do a bond, is that going to be a problem because we're at our maximum indebtedness amount?
No, that's specific just to that urban renewal area, so that really won't affect any of the other types of borrowings that we do.
I tell you, this is fascinating to me, and I really appreciate your patience in actually unpacking this for me because, I don't just give away $30 million every day, so I have to know what's going on with it. So thank you. Please continue.
Okay. So I mentioned that the projects we won't be able to draw on the line of credit until those projects have been budgeted for as part of the annual budget process or one of the fall or spring supplemental budget processes. And then also within that $30 million, a portion of that will actually be dedicated to a debt service reserve fund on a future long-term bond issue. So, $30 million won't be technically being used 100% for the projects. It'll be used to fund a debt service reserve fund that helps the marketability of the long-term bond issue when we sell those in the open market.
I feel like I need a bond 101 class, right?
Yeah, it's not the more straightforward stuff.
Maybe
Yeah.
bonding for idiots or something. Right? Because it's like it's really important for us to be able to see a big picture of this, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
Prosper comes in and they want 30 million, and then transportation comes in and they're talking about something else, right? So I would love the opportunity to schedule something like that for my office because
sure.
I think it's really critical that we understand the big picture and not just the narrow focus that we have today. Thank you.
Absolutely. And also, so we currently are, we already have existing lines of credit for these urban renewal areas, and those are up for expiration, so we typically will roll those over and renew them. So this authorization will be utilized as part of that rollover process, which is scheduled to occur in this December.
Did you have another question? Commissioner Fitz? No? Very good. Any public testimony?
No one else signed up?
All right, well then, I'll just end on this note. First of all, I'm actually really pleased that Commissioner Hardesty just asked to learn more about bonding, because I happen to think that bonding is one of the most exciting things ever. And there's a tremendous, as they say, there's gold in them thar hills. And understanding it, the nuances of it is really important, and very few people actually take the time to do it. So I appreciate your proactive attitude. Thank you, gentlemen, for a good presentation. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. We're adjourned till 2 p.m.
Thank you. Thanks.